You believe you need to eliminate your emotions to find peace. But the Buddha taught the opposite. Healing is feeling, not fleeing. When you stop resisting sadness, anger, or fear and simply observe with gentleness, something profound happens. The pain you have carried for years begins to dissolve. Buddhist monks have known for over 2,500 years that true emotional healing does not come from force, but from mindful awareness. These 20 meditation techniques will guide you through the journey of embracing your inner wounds without judgment. Prepare to sleep while listening to this video. Subscribe to the channel. Leave your like and comment from which part of the world you are watching. Get comfortable and relax. Let's begin. Have you ever noticed how we often try to run away from our painful emotions, especially when dealing with loss? Yet somehow, they always catch up with us. Ancient Buddhist wisdom offers a different approach through Vipassana meditation, a practice that has helped countless people navigate through the stormy seas of grief for over 2,000 years, as Vipassana, which means clear seeing or insight in Pali, is fundamentally about being present with whatever arises in our experience, pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral, without trying to change it. When we lose someone or something dear to us, our natural tendency is to push away the pain, distract ourselves, or become completely overwhelmed by our emotions. This meditation practice offers a middle path that acknowledges grief while providing the tools to process it in a healthier way. At its core, Vipassana teaches us to observe our thoughts, emotions, and bodily sensations with a kind, non-judgmental awareness. When practicing this form of meditation during grief, we learn to notice thoughts like, "I can't handle this pain," or "I'll never be happy again," simply as thoughts, not as absolute truths. We observe the physical manifestations of grief, perhaps a tightness in the chest, a knot in the stomach, or tears welling up, with curiosity rather than resistance. The practice begins quite simply. You find a comfortable position, often sitting, though you can also practice lying down or even walking. You close your eyes or maintain a soft gaze and begin to notice your breath, not controlling it, just observing its natural rhythm. When grief arises, and it will, you acknowledge its presence. Grief is here now. You might mentally note. You observe where you feel it in your body, what thoughts accompany it, and how it shifts and changes moment by moment. What makes Vipassana particularly powerful for processing loss is that it teaches us about impermanence, anicca in Pali, through direct experience. As we sit in meditation day after day, we begin to notice that even our most intense feelings of grief aren't static. They come in waves, peak, and eventually subside, only to return again, perhaps in a different form. This first-hand understanding that nothing, not even our deepest suffering, remains unchanged forever can offer profound comfort. One woman who lost her husband suddenly in a car accident described her experience with Vipassana. "For the first 6 months after his death, I could barely function. Starting a daily meditation practice didn't make my grief disappear, but it gave me a way to be with it without being consumed by it. I began to notice moments, brief at first, when the heaviness would lift slightly. Those moments gradually expanded. I still miss him terribly, but the meditation helped me see that my grief wasn't a solid, unchanging thing that would suffocate me forever." Neuroscience research has begun to validate what Buddhist practitioners have known for centuries. Regular mindfulness meditation actually changes the brain in ways that help us process difficult emotions. Studies show increased activity in the prefrontal cortex, the area responsible for emotional regulation, and decreased activity in the amygdala, our brain's alarm system. These changes help explain why practitioners often report feeling more balanced even while experiencing strong emotions. Another crucial aspect of Vipassana for grief processing is that it creates a sense of spaciousness around our pain. Through regular practice, we develop what some teachers call the witnessing consciousness, an awareness that can observe grief without being completely identified with it. This doesn't mean becoming detached or dissociated. Rather, it means developing the capacity to hold our grief with tenderness, while also recognizing that we are more than our grief. Many people find that integrating Vipassana into their daily routine provides an anchor during the chaotic and disorienting period of loss. Starting with just 5 or 10 minutes each morning can make a significant difference. Some find it helpful to attend guided sessions or retreats where they can deepen their practice with the support of experienced teachers and community. It's important to note that Vipassana isn't about bypassing the grief process. In fact, it's quite the opposite. It's about fully acknowledging and honouring our loss. The difference is that we learn to be with our pain in a way that allows for healing rather than prolonged suffering. We don't try to rush through grief or force it away. We simply create conditions where natural healing can occur. One of the most common misconceptions about meditation for grief is that it will immediately make you feel better. There may be days when you sit to meditate and find yourself crying throughout the entire session. From a Vipassana perspective, this isn't failure. It's the practice working exactly as it should. You're allowing yourself to feel what needs to be felt, creating space for emotions that might otherwise remain bottled up. The practice can be particularly helpful for addressing the complex emotions that often accompany grief. Beyond sadness, people experiencing loss frequently encounter anger, guilt, relief, confusion, and even moments of joy. Vipassana teaches us to recognize and acknowledge these varied emotional states without judgment, understanding that all of them are natural parts of the grieving process. As your practice deepens, you might notice a growing capacity to stay present, not just during formal meditation sessions, but throughout your daily life. This presence allows you to recognize grief triggers as they arise and respond to them with awareness rather than automatic reactivity. You might find yourself better able to care for yourself in moments of intensity, perhaps taking a few conscious breaths, adjusting your environment, or reaching out for support when needed. Ultimately, Vipassana doesn't remove grief from our lives, nor should it. Our grief reflects the depth of our connection and love. What the practice offers instead is a way to relate to loss that honors its significance while preventing it from defining our entire existence. Through patient, consistent practice, many find that they can hold their grief alongside other experiences, moments of connection, beauty, and even joy, in an expanding heart that has been strengthened, not broken, by loss. A loving-kindness meditation, metta, for healing relationship trauma. Think back to the last time someone hurt you deeply, a betrayal, abandonment, or painful ending of a relationship. That sting you feel, sometimes years later, is relationship trauma lodged in your emotional body. While conventional wisdom might tell us that time heals all wounds, many people find that relationship injuries remain tender spots in their hearts for decades unless actively addressed. This is where metta meditation, one of Buddhism's most heart-centered practices, offers a powerful pathway to healing. Metta, often translated as loving-kindness or boundless friendliness, is a systematic meditation practice that cultivates feelings of goodwill, first toward ourselves and then gradually extending outward to others. Unlike many Western approaches that focus primarily on analyzing past hurts, metta works directly with the heart's capacity to transform how we relate to ourselves and those who have caused us pain. The practice begins with ourselves, which is significant because relationship trauma often leaves us feeling fundamentally flawed or unlovable. You sit comfortably, bring awareness to your heart area, and silently repeat phrases such as, "May I be safe," "May I be happy," "May I be healthy," "May I live with ease." These aren't magical incantations, but tools to help reconnect with your innate capacity for self-compassion, which is often the first casualty of relationship trauma. Many practitioners describe intense resistance when they first attempt to direct loving kindness toward themselves. One man who had experienced a series of rejections explained, "I felt like I was lying to myself. The words seemed hollow, and I kept thinking I didn't deserve kindness." This resistance itself is often revealing, highlighting how relationship wounds can damage our relationship with ourselves. The practice invites gentle persistence, continuing to offer these wishes to yourself even when it feels impossible to receive them. Once there's a foundation of self-kindness, the practice expands in widening circles. You begin directing the same phrases towards someone easy to love, perhaps a mentor, a supportive friend, or even a beloved pet. From there, you gradually work with more challenging relationships, casual acquaintances, difficult people, and eventually, those who have caused you pain. This gradual approach is crucial for healing relationship trauma. Attempting to direct loving kindness towards someone who hurt you deeply before you've established a base of self-compassion often backfires, reinforcing patterns of self-abandonment that may have contributed to the relationship dynamics in the first place. The Buddhist approach recognizes that healing happens in layers, with each stage building on the foundation of the previous one. Neuroscience research on metta meditation shows fascinating results that help explain its effectiveness for relationship healing. Regular practitioners show increased activity in brain regions associated with empathy, emotional regulation, and positive emotions. Perhaps most relevant to relationship trauma, metta practice decreases activity in the default mode network, the brain regions responsible for self-referential thinking, including rumination about past hurts and worries about future relationships. One common misconception about metta practice is that it requires you to forgive those who have harmed you or to pretend the harm never happened. This is not at all what the practice teaches. Instead, metta acknowledges the reality of your pain while recognizing that holding on to resentment creates ongoing suffering primarily for yourself. The practice offers a path to freedom from this suffering without denying the legitimacy of your original hurt. A woman who had experienced childhood emotional abuse from her mother described her journey with metta. "For years, I thought that sending loving kindness to my mother meant I was saying what she did was okay. What I eventually understood was that I wasn't doing the practice for her, I was doing it for me. The resentment I carried was poisoning my other relationships and keeping me locked in a victim identity. Gradually directing metta toward her, while still maintaining appropriate boundaries, helped me release the grip that relationship had on my heart." The practice works particularly well for addressing the hypervigilance that often follows relationship trauma. After being hurt, many people develop protective patterns, difficulty trusting, emotional walls, or abandonment sensitivity that may prevent future harm but also block genuine connection. Metta meditation gradually softens these defenses from the inside out, allowing for discernment rather than blanket distrust. When practicing metta for relationship healing, patience is essential. The protective barriers around your heart likely took years to build and served an important purpose. They won't dissolve overnight, nor should they. The practice honors the intelligence behind these defenses while gently investigating whether they're still serving you in your current life. Sometimes, simply noticing the presence of these barriers with kindness creates space for them to begin softening naturally. Many practitioners find it helpful to work with specific, challenging relationships during formal meditation periods. You might bring to mind someone who hurt you. Notice the sensations and emotions that arise, and then intentionally offer the phrases, "May you be safe," "May you be happy," "May you be healthy," "May you live with ease." When resistance arises, as it almost certainly will, you direct compassion toward that resistance rather than forcing yourself to feel something you don't. Interestingly, many people report that their most significant insights occur not when directing loving kindness towards others, but when they notice how difficult it is to do so. These moments of resistance offer windows into the specific ways your heart has been wounded and protected. With practice, you learn to meet these discoveries with curiosity rather than judgment, seeing them as opportunities for deeper healing. The transformative potential of metta becomes particularly evident in how it affects current and future relationships. As you practice regularly, you may notice increased discernment about who to trust, greater resilience when small hurts occur, and a growing capacity to remain open-hearted even in challenging interactions. The practice doesn't make you naive or vulnerable to exploitation, quite the opposite. It helps you develop a wise heart that can remain engaged without abandoning yourself in the process. While metta can be practiced anywhere, many find that learning in community provides valuable support for this heart-opening work. Buddhist centers worldwide offer courses specifically focused on metta meditation, and increasingly, therapeutic approaches are incorporating these practices into trauma healing protocols. The combination of ancient wisdom and contemporary psychological understanding creates a particularly potent approach to relationship healing. Perhaps the most profound gift of metta practice is the discovery that your capacity for loving kindness, even toward those who have harmed you, is not dependent on their actions or worthiness. This realization is deeply liberating. Your heart's freedom is no longer contingent on others' behavior, apologies, or changes. While reconciliation may happen in some cases, the inner healing that metta offers is available regardless of external circumstances. For anyone carrying the weight of relationship wounds, metta meditation offers a gentle but powerful invitation to reclaim your heart's natural capacity for kindness without denying your experiences or prematurely forcing forgiveness. Through consistent practice, the barriers created by past hurts gradually soften, making way for relationships characterized by authentic connection rather than fear. The scars of relationship trauma may remain, but they no longer have to determine how you move through the world and connect with others. While metta practice opens the heart to heal relationship wounds, our emotional pain often resides not just in our thoughts, but in our physical bodies as well. Many Buddhist practitioners discover that the body itself serves as a storage facility for unprocessed emotions, sometimes holding on to feelings for decades after the original experiences. This understanding forms the foundation of body scan meditation, another powerful Buddhist technique for emotional healing that works directly with the physical dimension of our emotional experience. The body scan practice acknowledges what modern psychology has only recently confirmed: emotions are not merely mental events but whole body experiences with physical manifestations. That knot in your stomach during anxiety, the heaviness in your chest during grief, the burning sensation in your face during shame, these aren't coincidental physical side effects, but integral aspects of emotional experience. Through systematic body scanning, practitioners learn to identify, feel, and eventually release these stored emotional patterns. The practice typically begins by finding a comfortable position, usually lying down, though it can also be done sitting. You bring gentle, non-judgmental awareness to different parts of your body in sequence, often starting with the toes and gradually moving upward to the top of your head. The key quality you cultivate is a patient, curious attention, not trying to change anything, just noticing what's already there. As you scan your body, you might discover areas that feel numb, tense, painful, or pleasant. You might notice temperature variations, tingling, pulsing, or other sensations. The instruction is simply to observe these sensations as they are, allowing them to be present without trying to fix or change them. This seemingly simple practice often reveals surprising insights about our emotional landscape. A massage therapist who incorporated body scan into her daily routine shared, "I was amazed to discover how much anger I was holding in my jaw, tension I wasn't even aware of until I started doing regular body scans. As I brought awareness to that area day after day, memories began to surface of times I'd swallowed my words to keep the peace in my family. The physical tension was directly connected to unexpressed emotions from my childhood. This connection between physical sensations and emotional history is at the heart of the practice. Buddhist psychology recognizes that when emotions aren't fully processed at the time they occur, they leave imprints in the body. These imprints can manifest as chronic tension, pain, or even illness. The body scan offers a method to bring awareness to these patterns, which is the first step toward releasing them. The practice works through several mechanisms. First, simply bringing mindful awareness to areas of tension often naturally leads to relaxation. You might notice that as you pay attention to a tight shoulder, it softens slightly all on its own. Second, the practice helps reconnect mind and body for people who have become disconnected from physical sensations, perhaps as a coping mechanism during trauma. Finally, the body scan cultivates a compassionate relationship with the body, countering tendencies to ignore, criticize, or battle against our physical experience. Unlike approaches that aim to override or control the body, the Buddhist body scan embraces a non-violent attitude toward physical sensations, even uncomfortable ones. This can be revolutionary for those who have spent years fighting against their bodies or trying to numb physical discomfort. The practice invites us to listen to the body's wisdom rather than imposing our agenda upon it. Many practitioners report spontaneous emotional releases during body scan practice. Someone might be focusing attention on their chest area and suddenly find tears flowing. Or attention to the throat might bring up feelings of anger that have been suppressed. These releases aren't forced or manufactured, they emerge naturally as awareness penetrates layers of physical armoring. A psychologist who uses body scan with trauma survivors explained, when the body has been holding emotions for a long time, bringing gentle awareness to those areas can create space for natural processing to occur. It's not about making something happen, but allowing what's already there to move and shift. For many trauma survivors, this approach feels safer than directly diving into traumatic memories, because it works indirectly through physical sensation. For those new to the practice, there are a few helpful guidelines. Start with shorter sessions, perhaps 15 or 20 minutes, and gradually extend the time as you become more comfortable. It's normal for the mind to wander during the practice. When you notice this happening, gently return attention to the body part you are exploring. If you encounter intense emotions or sensations, remember you can always shift your attention to a neutral or pleasant area of the body, such as the hands or feet, to stabilize yourself. Some people find it helpful to use guided recordings when beginning the practice, as the voice of an experienced teacher can help maintain focus and provide reassurance when challenging sensations arise. Many Buddhist centers and meditation apps offer guidance specifically for body scan meditation. As your practice deepens, you may find you can navigate the scan on your own, moving at a pace that feels right for your unique body and emotional landscape. The benefits of regular body scanning extend far beyond formal meditation sessions. Practitioners often report increased awareness of emotional states as they're arising, noticing physical cues before emotions become overwhelming. This early warning system allows for more skillful responses to emotional triggers. Many also describe a more harmonious relationship with their bodies, appreciating the body as an ally in emotional healing rather than an adversary or something to be ignored. For maximum benefit, many teachers recommend practicing the body scan daily, even if only for a short period. Consistency is more important than duration, as regular practice gradually dissolves layers of tension that may have accumulated over decades. Some find it particularly helpful to use the practice at the end of the day to release emotions that have built up, or first thing in the morning to check in with their emotional state before engaging with the world. While the body scan originated in Buddhist contexts, it has been embraced by many healing traditions and is now incorporated into various therapeutic approaches, including mindfulness-based stress reduction and somatic experiencing. The practice's effectiveness for emotional healing has been validated by research showing its benefits for conditions involving stored emotional tension, including chronic pain, post-traumatic stress, and anxiety disorders. As powerful as the body scan can be for emotional healing, it works most effectively as part of a comprehensive approach that might include other meditation practices, therapeutic support when needed, and attention to lifestyle factors that affect emotional well-being. The body scan offers a direct pathway to emotional release, complementing practices like Vipassana that work with mental patterns and Metta that addresses relational healing. As we release stored emotions through practices like the body scan, many of us discover that anxiety and stress have been constant companions in our lives, often manifesting as shallow, constricted breathing patterns. This recognition leads naturally to another cornerstone of Buddhist meditation practice: conscious breathing techniques specifically designed to calm the nervous system and address anxiety and panic. Breath-based practices hold a special place in Buddhist meditation traditions because the breath exists at the intersection of voluntary and involuntary bodily functions. We can consciously influence it, yet it also continues automatically. This unique characteristic makes breath the perfect bridge between the conscious and unconscious aspects of our being, providing a direct channel to influence our emotional state. The relationship between breath and anxiety works in both directions. When we're anxious, our breathing typically becomes shallow, rapid, and centered in the upper chest, a pattern associated with the fight or flight response. Conversely, deliberately shifting to slower, deeper breathing patterns signals safety to the nervous system, activating the parasympathetic rest and digest response. Buddhist meditation leverages this bidirectional relationship, using breath as a tool to regulate emotional states. The most fundamental breath awareness practice is remarkably simple, though not always easy. You find a comfortable seated position with your back reasonably straight, allowing for natural breathing. Then you simply bring attention to the physical sensations of breathing, perhaps noticing the air moving through your nostrils, the rising and falling of your chest, or the expansion and contraction of your abdomen. Whenever your mind wanders, which it inevitably will, you gently bring attention back to these breath sensations. A financial analyst who struggled with panic attacks described his experience. For years, I relied on anti-anxiety medication to function. When I learned basic breath awareness meditation, it was the first time I felt I had some control over my anxiety. I realized I had been holding my breath or breathing very shallowly when stressed, which was actually making the anxiety worse. Just learning to notice my breath throughout the day made a tremendous difference. What makes this approach particularly effective is that it directly counters several core mechanisms that perpetuate anxiety. Anxiety thrives on future-oriented thinking, worrying about what might happen, while breath awareness anchors attention firmly in the present moment. Anxiety involves pervasive muscle tension, while conscious breathing tends to promote physical relaxation. Perhaps most importantly, anxiety creates a sense of helplessness, while breath practices restore a sense of agency and control. Different Buddhist traditions offer various breathing techniques that can be tailored to specific manifestations of anxiety. For example, counted breathing, where you count each breath cycle up to 10, then start again, can be particularly helpful for racing thoughts, as it gives the conceptual mind a simple task to focus on. Breathing with a longer exhale than inhale, perhaps counting 4 on the inhale and 6 on the exhale, actively stimulates the parasympathetic nervous system, making it useful during acute anxiety episodes. For those experiencing panic attacks, the 4-7-8 technique adapted from yogic breathing has proven beneficial. This involves inhaling quietly through the nose for a count of 4, holding the breath for a count of 7, and exhaling completely through the mouth for a count of 8. This pattern is repeated several times. The extended exhale and breath retention help reset the breathing pattern that becomes dysregulated during panic. What distinguishes the Buddhist approach to breath work from some modern relaxation techniques is its emphasis on awareness rather than control. While certain patterns may be suggested, especially initially, the ultimate aim is not to manipulate the breath into some idealized pattern, but to develop a relationship of friendly attention with breathing as it naturally occurs. This non-controlling attitude itself becomes a powerful antidote to the anxious mind's need to manage and control experiences. A meditation teacher who specializes in anxiety explains, "Many people with anxiety are actually over-controlling by nature. It's part of how their anxiety manifests. Traditional relaxation techniques that focus heavily on controlling the breath can sometimes reinforce this tendency. The Buddhist approach is revolutionary because it's about being with the breath rather than doing something to it. This subtle shift helps anxious people practice letting go of control, which is often what they need most." Consistency is crucial when working with breath meditation for anxiety. Research suggests that regular short practice sessions have more impact than occasional longer ones. Many teachers recommend starting with just 5 minutes daily and gradually extending the duration. Some practitioners find it helpful to schedule several brief breath breaks throughout their day, using ordinary moments, waiting in line, sitting at a traffic light, before checking email, as reminders to connect with their breath. The beauty of breath awareness practices is their portability and accessibility. Unlike some meditation techniques that require specific conditions, breath is always available as an anchor for attention. This makes breath meditation particularly valuable for addressing anxiety that arises in daily life situations. A student with test anxiety might take a few conscious breaths before entering an exam room. A nervous public speaker might ground themselves with breath awareness before taking the stage. For those new to the practice, there are some helpful considerations. First, if you have trauma history or panic disorder, beginning with very brief periods of breath awareness is advisable, as extended focus on breathing can occasionally trigger anxiety in some individuals. Second, finding a comfortable posture is important. The body's position influences breathing patterns, so sitting with a reasonably straight spine allows for optimal breathing mechanics. Finally, approaching the practice with curiosity rather than expectation helps avoid the frustration that can come from trying to get it right. Integrating breath awareness with other Buddhist practices creates a comprehensive approach to anxiety management. Body scanning helps release tension that restricts natural breathing. Loving kindness meditation addresses the harsh self-criticism that often accompanies anxiety. Mindfulness develops the capacity to observe anxious thoughts without becoming caught in their storylines. Together, these practices address anxiety at multiple levels: physical, emotional, and cognitive. Scientific research increasingly validates what Buddhist practitioners have known for centuries. Studies show that regular breath-focused meditation reduces activity in the amygdala, the brain's fear center, and strengthens connections between the prefrontal cortex and emotional regulation centers. Breath practices have been shown to reduce stress hormones like cortisol and increase heart rate variability, a marker of the nervous system's ability to respond flexibly to stressors rather than becoming stuck in fight or flight mode. So, perhaps the most transformative aspect of Buddhist breath practices is how they change our relationship with anxiety itself. Rather than seeing anxiety as an enemy to be conquered, practitioners gradually develop the capacity to be present with anxious feelings without being overwhelmed by them. This shift from resistance to acceptance paradoxically creates space for anxiety to naturally subside. The breath becomes not just a technique for managing symptoms, but a pathway to a fundamentally different way of relating to our emotional landscape. While breath awareness creates a foundation of calm that helps us face anxiety, sometimes we encounter suffering so deep that we need more active approaches for transformation. This is where Tonglen meditation, one of Tibetan Buddhism's most powerful practices, offers a radical alternative to our usual ways of dealing with pain. Unlike many meditation techniques that focus primarily on finding peace or relaxation, Tonglen directly engages with suffering and transforms it into a catalyst for compassion. Tonglen, which literally means giving and taking, or sending and receiving in Tibetan, inverts our normal instinct to avoid pain and seek pleasure. Instead, it teaches us to move toward difficulty with courage and use our personal suffering as a bridge to understanding the universal nature of pain. This practice has helped countless practitioners transform their relationship with emotional distress, turning what might seem like an enemy into a powerful teacher. The basic technique is deceptively simple. As you breathe in, you visualize taking in the suffering, pain, or difficulty, either your own or that of others, typically imagined as dark, heavy smoke or clouds. As you breathe out, you visualize sending out relief, healing, and compassion in the form of bright, cooling light. This reverses our habitual pattern of grasping at what feels good and pushing away what feels bad. A hospice worker who regularly practices Tonglen shared, "When I first heard about breathing in suffering and breathing out relief, it sounded completely backwards. Why would I want to take in more pain? But when I actually tried it during a period of grief after losing a patient I'd grown close to, something unexpected happened. Instead of feeling more burdened by consciously breathing in the sadness, I felt a genuine sense of connection and openness. The grief was still there, but it felt less solid, less personal somehow." This experience points to one of Tonglen's core insights, that our attempts to shield ourselves from pain often create a sense of isolation that actually intensifies suffering. When we're willing to acknowledge our pain and connect it with the pain of others, something shifts. The suffering doesn't disappear, but it becomes more workable, less overwhelming, and strangely enough, a source of connection rather than separation. For beginners, Tonglen often starts with working with our own suffering. You might begin a session by connecting with a specific difficulty you're experiencing, perhaps a feeling of inadequacy, a health concern, a relationship struggle, or any source of emotional pain. You allow yourself to feel this difficulty directly, locating it in your body and acknowledging its presence. Then you begin the rhythm of breathing in the dark, heavy sensation of this specific pain, and breathing out relief, visualized as light, spaciousness, or whatever quality would bring healing to this particular suffering. As your practice deepens, you can extend Tonglen beyond your personal struggles. You might practice for someone you know who is suffering, a friend going through divorce, a family member dealing with illness, a colleague facing job loss. You breathe in their pain and breathe out whatever would bring them relief. Eventually, practitioners expand the circle further, doing Tonglen for all beings experiencing similar suffering, and ultimately for all suffering beings everywhere. This gradual expansion helps develop what Buddhists call bodhicitta, the awakened heart-mind that recognizes the interconnected nature of all life and responds with boundless compassion. Far from being a merely altruistic practice, Tonglen directly addresses our own emotional healing by transforming how we relate to pain itself. Instead of seeing suffering as something to escape from, we learn to use it as a doorway to greater compassion, wisdom, and connection. A cancer survivor described how Tonglen helped during her treatment. "During chemotherapy, I would practice Tonglen not just for myself, but for everyone in the treatment room with me, and then for cancer patients everywhere. On days when I felt too sick to do formal meditation, I would simply think, may this suffering be a substitute for the suffering of all beings while resting in bed. This completely changed my relationship with the illness. Instead of asking, why me? I began to feel that my experience had meaning and purpose in a larger context. What makes Tonglen particularly effective for emotional healing is that it works directly with the energetics of emotions rather than their conceptual content. Many therapeutic approaches focus on understanding the origins of our emotional patterns or changing the thoughts behind them. Tonglen works at a more fundamental level, transforming how energy moves through our system when we encounter difficulty. The in-breath creates space to fully acknowledge suffering rather than suppress it, while the out-breath prevents us from becoming stuck or overwhelmed in that suffering. The practice can be especially transformative for working with shame, guilt, and feelings of unworthiness. These emotions often create a sense of being fundamentally flawed or separate from others. Tonglen directly addresses this illusion of separation by connecting our personal experience with the universal human experience of struggle. Recognizing that countless others feel similar shame or inadequacy helps dissolve the isolating belief that we alone are defective. As with any powerful practice, Tonglen should be approached with appropriate caution and support. Some teachers recommend having a foundation in basic mindfulness before undertaking Tonglen, particularly when working with traumatic material. It's also important to remember that Tonglen isn't about bypassing appropriate emotional boundaries or taking on responsibilities that aren't yours. The practice works with the energy of suffering rather than its external circumstances. It doesn't mean you need to solve everyone's problems or expose yourself to harmful situations. For those interested in exploring Tonglen, many resources are available. Books like When Things Fall Apart by Pema Chodron offer accessible introductions to the practice. Many Buddhist centers provide guided Tonglen sessions, and numerous audio recordings can guide beginners through the visualization process. As with any meditation practice, finding guidance from experienced teachers helps navigate challenges that arise during the learning process. What many practitioners discover through Tonglen is that our pain, the very thing we try so hard to avoid, contains within it the seeds of our greatest healing. By turning towards suffering with courage and compassion, we discover a resilience and openness that remains unavailable as long as we're running from difficulty. The practice doesn't promise to eliminate pain from our lives, but it offers something perhaps more valuable, the capacity to transform that pain into a catalyst for awakening the heart. The courage to face suffering cultivated in Tonglen practice naturally opens into another essential dimension of emotional healing, learning to treat ourselves with the same kindness we would offer to a dear friend. While many Buddhist practices address our relationship with difficulty, self-compassion meditation specifically targets the harsh inner critic that so often accompanies emotional struggle. This critical voice, the one that says we're not good enough, that we should be better, stronger, or different than we are, often causes as much suffering as the original emotional wound itself. Self-compassion meditation combines elements of mindfulness with deliberate cultivation of kindness toward oneself, creating a powerful antidote to patterns of self-judgment and shame that keep many people locked in cycles of emotional distress. Unlike self-esteem, which often depends on external achievements or comparisons with others, self-compassion offers a stable foundation of inner kindness that remains available regardless of our successes or failures. The practice has roots in traditional Buddhist metta loving-kindness meditation, but has been adapted by contemporary teachers to specifically address the epidemic of self-criticism in modern cultures. Kristin Neff, a leading researcher in this field, defines self-compassion as having three core components: mindfulness of suffering, recognition of our common humanity, and kindness toward ourselves. Buddhist self-compassion practices incorporate all these elements, creating a comprehensive approach to healing shame and self-criticism. A college professor who struggled with perfectionism described his experience. "I'd always pushed myself mercilessly, believing that self-criticism was necessary for achievement and self-compassion was just self-indulgence. When I began practicing self-compassion meditation regularly, I discovered something surprising. Not only did I feel better emotionally, but my work actually improved. Without the constant drain of harsh self-judgment, I had more creative energy available and could take risks I'd previously avoided for fear of failure." The formal practice often begins by connecting with a specific instance of suffering, difficulty, or self-criticism in your life. Unlike some meditation approaches that might encourage you to observe these feelings with detached awareness, self-compassion meditation actively engages your capacity for warmth and care in response to your own pain. You might place your hand on your heart, feel the warmth of your palm, and offer yourself words of kindness such as, "May I be kind to myself in this moment of suffering," or "This is really hard right now, and I'm here for myself through this." For many people, directing compassion toward themselves feels awkward, unfamiliar, or even wrong at first. We're often far more practiced at being kind to others than to ourselves. A study by Neff found that 88% of people reported being more compassionate toward others than toward themselves. This self-compassion gap points to how countercultural the practice can initially feel, particularly for those raised in environments where self-criticism was equated with virtue or responsibility. A healthcare worker who incorporated self-compassion into her daily routine shared, "The first few weeks of practice were actually painful. I'd realized just how cruel my internal dialogue had been for decades. I would say things to myself that I would never dream of saying to anyone else, not even someone I disliked. Gradually, I began to recognize this voice as a misguided attempt to keep myself safe through criticism rather than support. As I continued practicing, responding to my mistakes and struggles with kindness started to feel more natural, less forced." What makes self-compassion meditation particularly powerful for emotional healing is that it directly addresses the shame that often underlies or accompanies other emotional difficulties. Whether we're dealing with anxiety, grief, depression, or relationship struggles, the added layer of shame, the sense that we shouldn't be having these difficulties or that they reflect some fundamental flaw in us, often compounds our suffering. Self-compassion creates a safe internal environment where difficult emotions can be processed without this additional burden of self-judgment. The practice also helps disrupt the isolation that typically accompanies emotional struggle. A key aspect of self-compassion meditation involves recognizing our common humanity, understanding that suffering, failure, and imperfection are part of the shared human experience rather than signs that we've uniquely failed. Many practitioners incorporate phrases like "other people feel this way too," or "this is a moment of suffering that connects me with others who struggle in similar ways" into their practice, directly countering the shame-based belief that our difficulties separate us from others. Research strongly supports the benefits of self-compassion for emotional well-being. Studies show that people with higher levels of self-compassion demonstrate greater emotional resilience, less depression and anxiety, healthier relationships, and even improved immune function. Perhaps counterintuitively, self-compassion is associated with greater personal responsibility and more effective action toward goals, dispelling the myth that being kind to ourselves leads to complacency or laziness. For those interested in developing self-compassion, various approaches are available. Some find it helpful to start with brief, informal practices, perhaps taking a self-compassion break when noticing distress during daily activities. This might involve acknowledging suffering. This is a moment of difficulty. Remembering common humanity. Others feel this way too. And offering kindness to oneself. May I be kind to myself right now. Others benefit from more structured, formal meditation sessions, perhaps using guided recordings that lead them through the process of generating self-compassion. Many people find physical touch an important component of self-compassion practice. Placing a hand on your heart, giving yourself a gentle hug, or using other soothing touch activates the parasympathetic nervous system and releases oxytocin, creating physiological conditions that support emotional healing. This embodied aspect of the practice helps translate self-compassion from an intellectual concept to a felt experience. What makes Buddhist approaches to self-compassion particularly nuanced is their integration with wisdom practices that address the nature of self. While conventional therapeutic approaches might focus primarily on replacing negative self-talk with positive messages, Buddhist self-compassion includes insight into the constructed and impermanent nature of the self-concept itself. This wisdom dimension helps practitioners avoid getting caught in attempts to build up a more positive self-image, instead offering kindness to whatever aspects of experience arise without needing to solidify a fixed sense of self at all. As self-compassion practice deepens, many practitioners notice a transformation in how they relate to others as well as themselves. The capacity for genuine compassion expands in all directions, creating more authentic and supportive relationships. Rather than compassion being a limited resource that must be rationed between self and others, it becomes an abundant quality that naturally flows both inward and outward, creating healing ripples throughout one's entire relational world. While developing self-compassion transforms how we relate to ourselves during difficult times, many practitioners find they still become caught up in identifying with emotional states. This is where Zazen, the cornerstone practice of Zen Buddhism, offers a radically simple yet profound approach to transcending emotional attachments altogether. Unlike practices that work directly with emotional content or aim to generate specific states, Zazen cuts through the entire process of emotional identification by returning to the most fundamental aspect of experience: just sitting, just being. Zazen, which simply means seated meditation in Japanese, is characterized by an emphasis on physical stability, mental presence, and a direct, non-conceptual relationship with experience. The form itself is remarkably straightforward. The practitioner sits on a cushion with legs crossed in lotus or half-lotus position if possible, though other positions including sitting in a chair are acceptable if necessary. The back is straight but not rigid, the chin slightly tucked, and the hands rest in a specific position called the cosmic mudra, left hand on top of right, palms up, with thumbs lightly touching to form an oval. This precise physical arrangement isn't arbitrary. The stable triangular base created by the crossed legs and the balanced upright posture of the spine create optimal conditions for both alertness and relaxation. As one Zen teacher puts it, the body itself becomes an expression of awakened mind. This embodied quality of Zazen makes it particularly effective for transcending emotional attachments, which so often manifest as physical tension patterns that perpetuate certain emotional states. A software engineer who had practiced Zazen daily for 3 years described his experience. Before I started practicing, I was completely at the mercy of my emotional reactions. If something upsetting happened at work, I'd carry that irritation home with me and often take it out on my family. Through regular Zazen practice, I've developed the ability to recognize emotions as they arise without becoming them. The emotion still appears, but there's a spaciousness around it. I can feel angry without being taken over by anger. This distinction between feeling an emotion and becoming identified with it is at the heart of Zazen's approach to emotional freedom. The instruction in Zazen is remarkably simple. Just sit, maintain the posture, and when thoughts or emotions arise, neither pursue them nor push them away, simply return attention to the present moment, often using the breath or bodily sensations as an anchor. Through this process, practitioners gradually discover that emotions, like all phenomena, are transient appearances in awareness rather than defining aspects of identity. Unlike meditation approaches that involve visualization, affirmation, or directed mental activity, Zazen is characterized by a quality of non-doing. This non-manipulative quality makes it particularly powerful for transcending emotional attachments. Many of our emotional patterns are perpetuated precisely by our attempts to control, fix, or change our experience. Zazen cuts through this entire cycle by returning to simple presence, over and over again. A psychotherapist who incorporates Zen principles into her clinical practice explained, "Much of our emotional suffering comes from fighting against reality, wanting things to be different than they are. Zazen trains us in the art of non-resistance. By sitting with whatever arises without trying to change it, we paradoxically create conditions where natural transformation can occur. I've seen patients make more progress through incorporating regular Zazen into their lives than through years of analysis sometimes. The apparent simplicity of Zazen belies its depth. Beginners often find it surprisingly challenging to just sit without engaging in their habitual patterns of thinking, planning, reminiscing, or fantasizing. This difficulty itself becomes valuable feedback, revealing how constantly we avoid direct contact with our actual experience in favor of conceptual activity. As practice deepens, practitioners report increasing ability to distinguish between direct experience and the stories they tell themselves about that experience, a distinction that proves crucial for emotional freedom. Neurologically, research on long-term Zen practitioners shows interesting changes in brain function. Studies using EEG measurements indicate that experienced Zen meditators show increased gamma wave activity, associated with heightened awareness and present moment attention. fMRI studies suggest decreased activity in the default mode network, brain regions associated with self-referential thinking and mind-wandering. These neurological changes help explain how regular Zazen practice can create lasting shifts in one's relationship with emotions rather than just temporary relief. For those interested in exploring Zazen, starting with brief periods is recommended. Even 5 to 10 minutes of daily practice can begin establishing the neural pathways that support emotional freedom. Many find it helpful to receive instruction from an experienced teacher who can provide guidance on posture and approach. Zen centers worldwide offer introductory workshops and regular sitting periods, though simple instructions are also available in books and online resources. A common misconception about Zazen is that its goal is to eliminate emotions or achieve a state devoid of feeling. This misunderstanding conflates transcending emotional attachments with suppressing emotional experience. In reality, seasoned Zen practitioners often report experiencing emotions more vividly and directly, but without the compulsive identification that turns feeling into suffering. The emotion arises, is fully experienced, and passes away without leaving residue, like writing on water, as one Zen saying describes it. This non-attachment to emotional states doesn't lead to coldness or indifference, as some might fear. Rather, it creates the conditions for more authentic responsiveness in relationships and life situations. When we're not caught in compulsive reactions based on emotional patterns, we can respond freshly and appropriately to what each moment actually calls for. This freedom manifests as increased compassion, clarity, and effectiveness in daily life. A musician who incorporated Zazen into her daily routine shared, "I used to get terrible performance anxiety that would sometimes prevent me from playing at my best. Through Zazen practice, I learned to recognize the physical sensations of anxiety, the racing heart, the shallow breathing, without adding the additional layer of 'I'm anxious and that's terrible and I need to make it stop.' Now when those sensations arise before a performance, I can acknowledge them without being controlled by them. Ironically, I feel emotions more fully now, but they don't define or limit me the way they used to." The simplicity of Zazen makes it accessible to people from all backgrounds, regardless of religious beliefs or spiritual orientation. While embedded in Buddhist tradition, the practice itself doesn't require adopting any particular belief system, only a willingness to sit with one's actual experience. This universality has contributed to Zen's growing popularity in therapeutic settings, corporate environments, and educational institutions where its benefits for emotional regulation and mental clarity are increasingly recognized. For many practitioners, The most profound insight that emerges from regular zazen is discovering that emotional freedom doesn't come from having only pleasant emotions or no emotions at all, but from recognizing that our fundamental nature transcends any particular emotional state. This realization creates a deep sense of peace that doesn't depend on external circumstances or internal emotional weather, a freedom that remains available even amidst life's inevitable challenges. While the still, seated practice of zazen offers a powerful pathway to emotional freedom, some people find that remaining motionless actually intensifies anxiety or trauma responses, making it difficult to access meditation's benefits. This is where walking meditation, known as Kinhin in Zen traditions and as Kankama in Theravada Buddhism, provides an accessible entry point to mindfulness practice that simultaneously grounds the body and calms the mind. Particularly for trauma survivors, this movement-based approach often proves more immediately beneficial than seated practices. Walking meditation occupies a respected place in Buddhist tradition, with accounts of the Buddha himself regularly practicing it between periods of sitting meditation. In some monasteries, monks alternate between hours of sitting and walking practice throughout the day. This isn't merely to stretch the legs, but recognizes that different forms of meditation offer unique benefits and that the integration of mindfulness with movement creates a comprehensive approach to practice. Unlike regular walking, which we typically do on autopilot while our minds are elsewhere, walking meditation involves bringing full awareness to the experience of walking itself. The pace is usually slower than normal walking, sometimes extremely slow, though this varies by tradition. Attention is directed to the sensations of the feet touching the ground, the movement of the legs, the shifting of weight from one foot to the other, and the overall experience of the body in motion. When the mind wanders, as it inevitably will, the practitioner gently returns attention to these physical sensations. A social worker who specializes in trauma recovery explained why this practice proves so valuable for her clients. Many trauma survivors feel disconnected or dissociated from their bodies, a natural protective mechanism that helped them survive overwhelming experiences. Walking meditation provides a gentle way to begin rebuilding that connection. The rhythmic, predictable movement stimulates the brain's regulatory systems and helps establish a sense of safety. Plus, the person maintains complete control over their movement, which is crucial for those whose trauma involved feeling trapped or powerless. This element of agency, the ability to control one's own movement, makes walking meditation particularly suitable for trauma processing. Unlike seated meditation, where practitioners might feel vulnerable or exposed, walking practice allows for ongoing movement and engagement with the environment, which can help maintain a sense of safety and control while still developing mindfulness skills. The bilateral stimulation created by alternating steps also appears to support trauma processing at a neurological level, similar to approaches like EMDR, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. The rhythmic left-right movement seems to facilitate the integration of traumatic memories, helping shift them from emotionally reactive implicit memories to more neutral explicit memories. While walking meditation wasn't developed specifically for this purpose, many practitioners report that difficult memories naturally arise and transform during the practice. A veteran with PTSD shared his experience. "I couldn't do seated meditation at first. Sitting still with my thoughts was too overwhelming. My therapist suggested trying walking meditation instead, starting with just walking back and forth in a hallway while paying attention to my feet. I gradually built up to longer sessions. Something about the movement kept me grounded enough that I could begin to notice and work with the thoughts and sensations that would normally send me into a panic. It became a bridge that eventually helped me develop other meditation skills." For beginners, the practice can start very simply. Find a space where you can walk uninterrupted for at least 10 to 20 steps in one direction. This could be a hallway, a room with furniture moved aside, a quiet park path, or any relatively flat area. Begin by standing still for a few moments, feeling your feet in contact with the ground and taking a few conscious breaths. Then start walking at a slow but natural pace, bringing your attention to the sensations in your feet and legs as you move. Some traditions coordinate the breath with steps, perhaps breathing in for 3 steps and out for 3 steps, though this isn't essential. The key is maintaining continuous awareness of the physical experience of walking. When you notice your mind has wandered, gently bring it back to the sensations of movement without judgment or frustration. Upon reaching the end of your walking path, pause briefly, turn mindfully, and continue walking in the other direction. The beauty of walking meditation is its flexibility. It can be practiced for just a few minutes or extended to an hour or more. It works indoors or outdoors, requires no special equipment, and can be adapted to different physical abilities. Some practitioners with mobility limitations modify the practice to work with whatever movement is available to them, perhaps gentle movements of the arms or even attention to the process of moving in a wheelchair. A corporate executive who incorporated walking meditation into her daily routine described unexpected benefits. "I started practicing during my lunch break, just 20 minutes walking mindfully around a nearby park. Not only did it help with the stress and anxiety that had been building in my job, but I found I was making clearer decisions and relating to my team more effectively. There's something about the combination of movement and mindfulness that integrates different parts of my brain and helps me access more resources than when I'm stuck in my head." For those working specifically with trauma, several considerations can make the practice more accessible. Start with a familiar, safe environment where unexpected stimuli are minimized. Keep your eyes open and soft-focused rather than closed. Remember that you can adjust the pace to whatever feels most supportive. Some find a very slow pace grounding, while others need to walk more briskly at first to discharge anxiety. If difficult emotions or sensations arise, you might temporarily shift attention to something neutral and stabilizing in your environment. Then gently return to the walking practice when ready. Many practitioners find it helpful to receive guidance when beginning walking meditation. Buddhist centers often include this practice in their introductory programs, and an increasing number of trauma-informed meditation teachers offer specific instruction for those working with traumatic stress. Various apps and online resources also provide guided walking meditation instructions, making the practice accessible even for those without local teachers. Beyond its benefits for trauma processing, walking meditation offers a practical way to integrate mindfulness into daily life. The skills developed during formal practice can be applied during ordinary walking activities, moving between meetings, walking to the store, or taking the dog out. This integration helps bridge the gap between meditation as a separate activity and mindfulness as a continuous life practice. A physical therapist who teaches walking meditation to chronic pain patients observed, "Many people can't sit still to meditate because of physical discomfort, but they can walk, even if just for short distances." The walking practice not only helps them develop mindfulness, but often reduces their pain levels because it interrupts the tension patterns that tend to amplify pain. Plus, they discover they can take this skill anywhere, using mindful walking while doing necessary activities rather than needing to carve out separate meditation time. What many discover through consistent walking meditation is that the ground beneath our feet has always been there, offering support and stability even during our most difficult emotional experiences. The simple act of mindfully placing one foot in front of the other becomes both a powerful metaphor and a direct experience of moving through life's challenges step by step, moment by moment, with presence and awareness that transforms our relationship with both our inner and outer journeys. While walking meditation grounds us through physical movement, some emotional blockages seem to reside deeper in our energetic system, resistant to purely physical or mental approaches. This understanding led Buddhist tantric traditions to develop chakra meditation, a practice that works with subtle energy centers in the body to release emotional blockages and restore balanced flow. Though often associated with Hindu yoga traditions, chakra work has been fully integrated into certain Buddhist lineages, particularly in Tibetan Vajrayana Buddhism, where it's recognized as a powerful method for emotional transformation. The chakra system maps 7 primary energy centers aligned along the central channel of the body. From the base of the spine to the crown of the head, each chakra corresponds to specific emotional themes and psychological qualities. The root chakra relates to safety and survival, the sacral chakra to pleasure and creativity, the solar plexus to personal power and identity, the heart to love and compassion, the throat to expression and truth, the third eye to insight and intuition, and the crown to connection with larger consciousness. When these energy centers become blocked or imbalanced due to trauma, stress, or unhealthy patterns, corresponding emotional difficulties often manifest. A massage therapist who incorporated chakra meditation into her personal and professional practice shared her experience. I'd struggled with chronic anxiety for years, trying everything from medication to cognitive therapy. When I began working with chakra meditation, particularly focusing on my solar plexus chakra where I felt a constant knot of tension, something profound started shifting. I realized my anxiety was connected to old patterns of giving away my power and not trusting my own decisions. As I directed healing attention to that area through visualization and breathwork, I gradually reclaimed a sense of confidence that medication alone never gave me. What distinguishes chakra meditation from some other approaches is its recognition of the body as an energy system where emotions aren't just abstract mental states but have specific locations and qualities. This perspective offers a map for understanding why certain emotions get stuck in particular areas of the body and provides targeted techniques for releasing these blockages. The practice typically begins with a period of centering, often through breath awareness or a body scan to establish presence. Then attention is brought to each chakra in sequence, usually starting either at the root and moving upward, or at the crown and moving downward. For each chakra, the practitioner brings awareness to its physical location, perhaps visualizing it as a spinning wheel of light in the traditional color associated with that center: red for root dot, orange for sacral, yellow for solar plexus, green for heart, blue for throat, indigo for third eye, and violet for crown. As attention rests on each chakra, the practitioner might notice areas of constriction, excessive energy, numbness, or balanced flow. Rather than forcing change, the approach involves bringing curious, compassionate awareness to whatever is discovered. This non-judgmental attention itself often initiates natural rebalancing. Additionally, specific visualization techniques, mantras, or movements may be employed to address particular imbalances. A psychologist who uses chakra meditation with trauma survivors explained, "When someone has experienced trauma, certain energy centers often become either shut down or hyperactive as protective mechanisms. For instance, someone who learned it wasn't safe to speak their truth might have a constricted throat chakra, while someone who experienced heartbreak might have partially closed their heart center to avoid further pain." Chakra meditation gives us a systematic way to identify these patterns and gently invite healing energy back into these areas. For those dealing with chronic emotional issues, regular chakra practice offers a structured approach for uncovering connections between physical sensations and emotional patterns. Someone experiencing persistent anger might discover intense heat and tension in the solar plexus. Through regular practice, they learn to direct cooling, balancing energy to this area, gradually transforming the anger into more constructive assertiveness. Similarly, someone struggling with fear might find a constricted root chakra. Visualization practices that strengthen and stabilize this center help establish a greater sense of security and grounding. The Buddhist approach to chakra work emphasizes that these energy centers aren't separate from our awareness, but are expressions of it in different forms. This non-dualistic understanding prevents practitioners from creating an artificial separation between spiritual energy work and everyday emotional reality. Instead, chakra practice becomes a way of bringing mindfulness into subtler dimensions of our embodied experience. A teacher who leads chakra meditation workshops described, "Many people come to chakra work expecting some kind of exotic or mystical experience. But what typically happens is much more practical. They start recognizing patterns, like how criticism from their boss always creates tightness in their throat, or how certain family interactions leave them feeling drained in their solar plexus. This awareness itself becomes transformative, giving them specific ways to work with challenging emotions rather than just being overwhelmed by them." For those new to chakra meditation, starting with brief focused sessions on one chakra at a time can be more effective than attempting to work with the entire system at once. For instance, if heart-related emotions like grief or loneliness are particularly challenging, spending 5 to 10 minutes daily bringing gentle attention to the heart center can initiate significant shifts. As familiarity with the practice grows, more comprehensive sessions addressing all 7 chakras can be incorporated. Many practitioners find it helpful to use guided meditations when beginning chakra work, as the subtle energy system may be difficult to sense initially. Visualization abilities also vary widely among individuals. Some people easily perceive colors and energy movements, while others have a more kinesthetic or intuitive experience. There's no right way to experience the chakras. The most important element is the quality of attention brought to the practice. The effects of regular chakra meditation often extend beyond emotional healing to physical well-being. Since many physical ailments have connections to emotional states, from tension headaches linked to throat chakra issues to digestive problems connected with solar plexus imbalances, addressing the energetic components of emotions frequently produces improvements in physical symptoms as well. A nurse who practiced chakra meditation daily for 6 months reported, "When I started, I was mainly hoping to address my chronic anxiety. What surprised me was how my long-standing digestive issues also began to improve. As I worked with balancing my solar plexus chakra, visualizing a bright yellow light and repeating affirmations about personal power, I noticed I was becoming less reactive to stressful situations. My stomach would no longer instantly knot up during confrontations at work. It was like addressing the energetic component of the anxiety had positive effects on my physical body too." While chakra meditation offers a powerful system for emotional healing, some practitioners find that persistent negative thought patterns continue to create disturbances in their energy system despite their best efforts at chakra balancing. This is where mantra meditation provides a complementary approach, working directly with the power of sacred sound to interrupt and transform negative mental patterns at their source. Mantra meditation, one of the oldest and most widely practiced forms of Buddhist meditation, utilizes the repetition of specific sounds or phrases to focus the mind and transform consciousness. The word mantra itself comes from 2 Sanskrit roots. Man, meaning mind, and tra, meaning tool or instrument, literally, a tool for the mind. While many meditation techniques aim to observe or witness thoughts, mantra practice actively replaces negative thought patterns with sounds that carry specific healing frequencies and intentions. A college professor who struggled with chronic depression described his experience. "My mind was constantly recycling the same negative thoughts, that I wasn't good enough, that my work didn't matter, that things wouldn't improve. I'd tried cognitive therapy techniques for years with limited success. When I began practicing mantra meditation with Om Mani Padme Hum, something different happened. Instead of trying to argue with my negative thoughts or analyze them, I simply replaced them with the mantra. Over time, I noticed entire days would pass without falling into my usual depressive thought patterns. The mantra seemed to create new neural pathways that bypassed the old negative loops." Different Buddhist traditions employ various mantras for specific purposes. The mantra Om Mani Padme Hum is associated with compassion and is perhaps the most widely used in Tibetan Buddhism. Om Shanti 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 invokes peace on multiple levels. Gate Gate, Paragate, Parasamgate, Bodhisvaha from the Heart Sutra represents transcendent wisdom. Nam Myoho Renge Kyo from Nichiren Buddhism is chanted to align with universal law and manifest one's highest potential. Each mantra carries particular energetic qualities that can help address specific emotional patterns. The practice itself is straightforward, though profound. The practitioner sits in a comfortable position and begins repeating the chosen mantra, either aloud, in a whisper, or silently in the mind. Some traditions use mala beads, a string of 108 beads, to count repetitions, moving one bead with each recitation. The focus remains on the sound and vibration of the mantra, allowing it to fill awareness. When the mind wanders to other thoughts, including negative patterns, the practitioner gently returns attention to the mantra without judgment. A therapist who recommends mantra practice to clients explained, "What makes mantra meditation particularly effective for negative thought patterns is that it engages multiple aspects of our being simultaneously. The vibration of sound affects our nervous system directly. The rhythm creates a soothing, predictable pattern that calms the limbic system. The meaning or intention behind the mantra influences our mental state, and the focused attention required to maintain the repetition builds concentration that strengthens our ability to direct our mind rather than being controlled by it." Many practitioners find mantra meditation more accessible than silent mindfulness practices, especially when dealing with severe anxiety or rumination. The mantra gives the mind something concrete to focus on, making it easier to interrupt spiraling thoughts. The rhythmic quality also creates a kind of momentum that helps carry the practitioner through difficult mental states that might otherwise derail their practice. A marketing executive who used mantra meditation to overcome workplace anxiety shared, "Before important meetings, my mind would race with catastrophic thoughts about all the ways I might fail or be judged. Silent meditation just gave those thoughts more space to multiply." With mantra practice, I would repeat Om Gam Ganapataye Namaha, a mantra for removing obstacles, while visualizing the sound dissolving the knots of tension in my chest. The combination of sound, rhythm, and visualization would shift my state completely, allowing me to enter meetings centered and confident instead of anxious and self-doubting. Modern neuroscience has begun documenting the effects of mantra meditation on brain function. EEG studies show increased alpha and theta wave activity during mantra recitation, indicating a state of relaxed alertness. fMRI research demonstrates reduced activity in the default mode network, the brain regions associated with mind-wandering and self-referential thinking where negative thought patterns typically proliferate. These findings help explain why many practitioners report that regular mantra practice creates lasting changes in their thought patterns, not just temporary relief. While traditional Buddhist mantra practice is embedded within spiritual lineages, the technique itself doesn't require adopting any particular belief system to be effective. Many contemporary practitioners use mantras simply as tools for mental and emotional well-being, appreciating their pragmatic benefits regardless of their spiritual origins. This accessibility has contributed to mantra meditation's growing popularity in therapeutic settings and stress reduction programs. For those interested in exploring mantra meditation, starting with short sessions of 5 to 10 minutes can build a sustainable practice. Many find it helpful to begin by reciting the mantra aloud, then gradually transition to silent repetition as concentration deepens. Consistency matters more than duration. Daily practice of even a few minutes creates more significant shifts than occasional longer sessions. Some practitioners find it beneficial to use the same mantra for an extended period, allowing its effects to deepen, while others work with different mantras depending on their specific emotional needs. A social worker who practiced mantra meditation for anxiety described unexpected benefits. I started using So Hum mantra to calm my anxiety, coordinating the syllables with my breath. Not only did it help with the immediate symptoms, but over time I noticed I was becoming more present and less reactive in challenging situations. The practice seemed to be retraining my nervous system at a fundamental level. Now, when anxious thoughts arise, I almost automatically return to the mantra rather than getting caught in worry loops. It's like I've developed a new mental habit that serves me rather than undermines me. What distinguishes mantra practice from positive affirmations or simple self-talk is the understanding that these sounds aren't merely psychological tools, but carry specific vibrational qualities that affect consciousness directly. Many traditional mantras are considered seed sounds, bija mantras, that bypass conceptual thinking entirely, working directly with the energy system. This non-conceptual quality makes mantra meditation particularly effective for breaking through deeply entrenched negative thought patterns that resist logical intervention. While mantra meditation offers powerful tools for replacing negative thought patterns with healing sounds, there are times when difficult emotions arise so strongly that we need a different approach altogether. Rather than trying to change our emotional experience or replace it with something more pleasant, the Buddhist practice of compassionate abiding teaches us how to simply stay with difficult feelings, creating space around them without being overwhelmed. This seemingly simple yet profound practice has helped countless practitioners develop a fundamentally different relationship with their emotional landscape. Compassionate abiding, sometimes called staying with or resting with difficult emotions, represents a radical departure from our usual strategies. Most of us have been conditioned to either suppress uncomfortable feelings, distracting ourselves through various activities, or become completely identified with them, believing I am angry or I am sad, rather than recognizing these as temporary emotional states moving through our awareness. Compassionate abiding offers a middle path that neither suppresses nor indulges emotional difficulty. A school counselor who incorporated this practice into both her personal life and work with teenagers described her experience. I used to oscillate between trying to talk myself out of unpleasant feelings or completely drowning in them. Learning to compassionately abide with emotions changed everything. During a particularly painful breakup, instead of my usual patterns of distraction or rumination, I would sit quietly each day and simply be with the heartache, noticing how it felt in my body, watching the thoughts that accompanied it, but not getting swept away in the story. The pain didn't disappear magically, but it moved through me more naturally, without creating the additional suffering of resistance. The practice itself is straightforward, though not necessarily easy. When a difficult emotion arises, perhaps anxiety, anger, shame, or grief, you create intentional space to be with it, rather than immediately reacting. Find a quiet place to sit if possible, though the practice can be done anywhere. Bring awareness to your body, locating where you physically feel the emotion, perhaps tightness in the chest for anxiety, heat in the face for anger, or heaviness in the belly for sadness. Rather than trying to analyze or change these sensations, simply stay with them with an attitude of gentle curiosity and compassion. As you maintain this presence with difficult feelings, you'll likely notice how they naturally shift and change. What initially seemed like one solid emotion, anxiety, might reveal itself as a complex mix of physical sensations, mental images, memories, and thoughts. By staying present without getting caught in the storyline about the emotion, you begin to experience its impermanent, flowing nature. This direct experience of emotional impermanence is itself profoundly liberating. A business executive who practiced compassionate abiding during a period of work-related stress shared, "I was facing possible layoffs at my company and experiencing intense fear about financial security. Rather than my usual approach of constantly checking my bank accounts and updating my resume, activities that actually intensified my anxiety, I began setting aside 20 minutes each evening to just be with the fear. I'd put my hand on my chest where I felt the most constriction and simply acknowledge, this is fear, and it's okay for it to be here. Over time, I noticed the fear would rise, peak, and then naturally subside when I didn't feed it with worry thoughts. This gave me much more clarity about practical steps to take without the emotional reactivity. What makes compassionate abiding particularly powerful is that it works directly with emotions in their raw, unprocessed form rather than through the filter of our thoughts about those emotions. Many therapeutic approaches focus primarily on changing thought patterns, which can be helpful but sometimes misses the direct bodily and energetic dimensions of emotional experience. By staying with the raw sensations of emotion in the body, practitioners often experience more complete and lasting resolution. This practice is especially valuable for working with emotions we've historically tried to avoid or suppress. Many of us grew up receiving messages that certain emotions were unacceptable, perhaps anger in a family that valued politeness above all else, or sadness in an environment where staying strong was paramount. These suppressed emotions don't disappear but remain stored in the body, often emerging in indirect ways like chronic tension, sleep disturbances, or seemingly unrelated emotional reactions. Compassionate abiding creates safe conditions for these stored emotions to finally be acknowledged and released. A therapist specializing in trauma recovery explained, "When we've experienced trauma, there are often emotions that were too overwhelming to fully process at the time: fear, rage, helplessness. The protective nervous system essentially puts these emotions on hold for later processing. The problem is that later never comes unless we intentionally create space for it. Compassionate abiding provides exactly that space, allowing emotions that have been stuck for years or even decades to finally move through to completion." For those new to the practice, starting with milder emotional states is recommended. Perhaps begin with a modest irritation or disappointment rather than your deepest grief or most intense fear. As your capacity develops, you can gradually work with stronger emotions. Many find it helpful to establish certain boundaries around the practice, perhaps deciding to stay with a difficult emotion for 5 minutes initially, using a timer if helpful. This creates a sense of safety, knowing there are limits to the exploration. It's important to note that compassionate abiding isn't about enduring emotional pain as some kind of test or spiritual achievement. The compassion element is crucial. You're learning to be with difficult feelings the way you might sit with a suffering friend, offering presence and care without trying to fix or change their experience. This compassionate quality prevents the practice from becoming another form of emotional bypassing or stoic suppression. A meditation teacher who has guided hundreds of students in this practice observed, "The most common misconception I see is people thinking they're doing it wrong if they still feel the difficult emotion. The goal isn't to make the emotion disappear, but to change your relationship with it. Success might look like being able to stay present with anger for 30 seconds before getting swept away in it, when previously you would have been immediately overwhelmed. Over time, those 30 seconds extend to minutes, and eventually you develop the capacity to be with even very challenging emotions without losing your center. Regular practice gradually develops what some teachers call emotional resilience, not the absence of difficult feelings, but the ability to experience them without being destabilized. This capacity transforms our emotional life from a series of reactions we feel victimized by into a rich landscape we can navigate with wisdom and balance. We discover that emotions, even very painful ones, can be our teachers rather than our tormentors when met with compassionate presence. As practitioners develop proficiency in compassionate abiding with specific emotions, many naturally begin to wonder about the nature of the mind itself that experiences these emotional states. If emotions come and go while something in us remains aware of them, what is the nature of that awareness? This inquiry leads naturally to empty mind meditation, a practice that works with directly experiencing the mind's inherent spaciousness beyond any particular emotional state. Empty mind meditation, known as wuxin in Chinese Zen traditions and as dwelling in awareness in Tibetan Buddhism, focuses on recognizing and resting in the open, boundless quality of mind that transcends specific mental contents. Unlike concentration practices that focus attention on a particular object, or analytical meditations that examine thoughts and emotions, empty mind meditation involves simply resting in the natural condition of awareness itself, vast, clear, dot, and unobstructed by fixation on any particular experience. A software engineer who discovered empty mind meditation after years of struggling with emotional volatility shared, "I'd spent most of my life completely identified with my thoughts and feelings, believing I was my anxiety or my anger. Learning to abide with difficult emotions was a huge step forward. But empty mind meditation took my practice to another level. I began to experience directly that beneath the constantly changing weather of my emotions was a sky-like awareness that remained untouched by whatever passed through it. This wasn't an intellectual understanding, but a direct experience that completely changed how I related to emotional turbulence." The practice itself is deceptively simple, though it often takes considerable preparation through other meditation approaches before practitioners can genuinely access it. You sit in a comfortable meditation posture and allow your mind to rest in its natural state without focusing on any particular object and without deliberately controlling or manipulating your experience. Unlike concentration practices where you repeatedly bring attention back to a chosen focus, in empty mind meditation you simply recognize the open, spacious quality of awareness itself and rest there. A common instruction is to let your awareness be like the sky, with thoughts and emotions passing through like clouds, some dark and stormy, others light and pleasant, but none of them altering the fundamental nature of the sky itself. This isn't about creating an empty state by suppressing thoughts or emotions, but rather recognizing the intrinsic spaciousness that already exists as the context for all mental experiences. A psychologist who integrates this approach into her clinical practice explained, "Many people suffering from emotional difficulties are completely identified with their mental contents. They believe they are their depression or anxiety. Empty mind meditation helps them recognize that there's an aspect of mind that remains untouched by even the most intense emotional states. This recognition creates a profound shift in how they relate to difficult experiences. Instead of being completely overwhelmed by an emotion, they can recognize it as something appearing within the larger field of awareness, like a wave on the ocean." What distinguishes empty mind meditation from relaxation techniques or other approaches aimed at creating peaceful states is its non-manipulative quality. The practice isn't about achieving any particular state of mind or emotion, but about recognizing the nature of mind itself that transcends all states. This makes it particularly powerful for emotional freedom, as it addresses the very root of emotional suffering, our tendency to become identified with transient mental states as if they defined our fundamental identity. A meditation teacher with 20 years of experience guiding students in this practice noted, "The biggest hurdle for most practitioners is that they try too hard. They approach empty mind meditation as another project for the ego. I'm going to achieve an empty mind state." But genuine empty mind practice isn't about achieving anything. It's about recognizing what's already present beneath our constant mental activity. It's more about letting go than adding something new. For those interested in exploring empty mind meditation, proper preparation is essential. Most traditions recommend establishing a foundation in concentration practices like breath awareness and in mindfulness practices that develop the to observe mental contents without identification. Without this preparation, attempts at empty mind meditation often result either in mind wandering or in subtle forms of dullness mistaken for the clear, luminous awareness the practice aims to reveal. A retired professor who practiced empty mind meditation daily shared, "When I first heard teachers describe resting in awareness beyond thoughts, it sounded mystical and unattainable. But after years of preparation through other practices, I had moments where the constant identification with my thinking suddenly dropped away, revealing a spacious awareness I hadn't known was always there. These moments gradually extended, and I discovered I could access this awareness even during emotionally challenging situations. My anger or fear might still arise, but I no longer became those states completely. There was always a background awareness that remained undisturbed. Many practitioners report that consistent empty mind practice gradually transforms their relationship with the entire spectrum of emotional experience. Rather than dividing emotions into positive ones to pursue and negative ones to avoid, they develop the capacity to allow all emotions to arise and pass without creating additional suffering through resistance or attachment. This doesn't mean becoming emotionally flat or disengaged from life, but rather experiencing emotions more directly and cleanly without the added layers of identification and reactivity that typically accompany them. A hospice nurse who used empty mind meditation to navigate the emotional challenges of her work described, "Caring for dying patients and grieving families exposes you to intense emotional situations daily. Before learning this practice, I would either become overwhelmed by others' suffering or shut down emotionally to protect myself. Empty mind meditation offered a middle path. I could remain fully present and compassionate without losing myself in the emotional intensity. The spaciousness I discovered through the practice gave me room to experience sadness, helplessness, or fear without being consumed by these emotions. This made me more effective in my work and prevented the burnout that's so common in my field." Research on advanced meditation practitioners engaging in empty mind type practices shows interesting neurological correlates, including increased gamma wave coherence across brain regions and unique patterns of default mode network activity. These findings suggest that the subjective experience of spacious awareness beyond specific mental contents corresponds to measurable changes in brain function, lending scientific support to the reports of practitioners throughout the centuries. While empty mind meditation reveals the spacious awareness that underlies all emotional states, many practitioners find they still need more active approaches to work with specific emotional wounds and integrate fragmented aspects of their experience. This is where Buddhist visualization practices offer powerful tools for emotional healing and integration. Unlike passive relaxation techniques or simple positive thinking exercises, these sophisticated visualization methods engage the mind's creative capacity to stimulate healing at levels that logical thinking alone cannot reach. Buddhist visualization practices utilize the mind's natural imaging faculty, the same capacity we use when remembering a loved one's face or planning a route to work, but channel it intentionally for emotional transformation. These practices recognize that the imagination isn't merely a fantasy factory, but a powerful faculty that directly influences our neurological and energetic systems, by creating specific internal images imbued with healing qualities. Practitioners can access and transform emotional wounds that may be stored pre-verbally or in parts of the psyche not easily reached through analytical approaches. A former combat veteran who struggled with PTSD symptoms for years after returning from active duty shared his experience. "Talk therapy helped me understand my trauma intellectually, but the nightmares and flashbacks continued. When I learned Buddhist visualization practices, particularly working with peaceful deities and healing light, something shifted at a deeper level. I would visualize healing light flowing through the exact areas in my body where I held tension and fear. Over months of practice, memories that had been terrorizing me for years began to lose their emotional charge. The images weren't just in my mind, I could feel them creating actual physical and emotional changes." One of the most accessible visualization practices involves working with healing light. The practitioner sits in a comfortable meditation posture and begins by establishing a sense of presence, perhaps through a few minutes of breath awareness. Then they visualize a source of healing light, perhaps imagined as a sphere of radiance above their head, or emanating from a Buddha figure, or simply appearing in space before them. The quality of this light is experienced as boundless compassion and wisdom that can dissolve emotional blockages and restore wholeness. The practitioner then visualizes this healing light entering their body, perhaps through the crown of the head, and flowing down through their entire system. As the light encounters areas of emotional wounding or tension, it's imagined as dissolving these blockages, much like sunshine melting ice. The practitioner might direct this light to specific body areas where emotional pain is stored, perhaps the heart for grief, the throat for unexpressed emotions, or the belly for fear. The practice concludes by imagining the entire body and mind filled with this radiant healing energy. A psychotherapist who incorporates these practices into her clinical work explained, "What makes visualization so effective is that it communicates directly with the limbic system and other parts of the brain that process emotions and sensory experience. Many emotional wounds occurred pre-verbally or are stored in non-verbal parts of our psyche. Visualization bypasses our analytical mind and works directly with these deeper systems. I've seen patients make breakthroughs with visualization practices after years of being stuck in talk therapy." More advanced visualization practices in Tibetan Buddhism involve working with specific archetypal figures or deities that embody particular healing qualities. For example, Tara represents compassionate action and protection from fear. Medicine Buddha embodies the healing power that alleviates suffering. Vajrasattva represents purification and the release of negative patterns. By visualizing these figures in detail and imagining receiving their healing qualities, practitioners access transformative energies that help integrate fragmented aspects of their emotional experience. A university professor who used deity visualization to work through childhood trauma described, "Visualizing green Tara during my meditation sessions gave me access to a sense of fierce protection and nurturing that was missing in my early life. I would imagine her compassionate presence enveloping me completely, and gradually I began to internalize these qualities. It wasn't about believing in an external savior, but about awakening qualities that were dormant within my own consciousness. Over time, I found myself responding to triggering situations with a groundedness and compassion that would have been unimaginable before." What distinguishes Buddhist visualization practices from some New Age or modern therapeutic approaches is their sophisticated understanding of how visualization affects consciousness. These aren't simply techniques for conjuring up pleasant mental pictures to temporarily feel better, but comprehensive methods for transforming the mind at fundamental levels. The visualizations are precisely structured to work with specific emotional patterns and are typically practiced within a context of ethical development and wisdom cultivation. For those new to visualization practice, starting with simple techniques is recommended. Many find it helpful to begin with basic healing light visualizations before attempting more complex practices involving detailed imagery. It's also important to recognize that visualization abilities vary widely among individuals. Some people naturally think in vivid images, while others have a more conceptual or kinesthetic experience. There's no right way to visualize, and the practice can be adapted to work with one's natural cognitive style. A meditation teacher with 20 years of experience guiding students in visualization practices noted, "The most common difficulty beginners face is judging their visualization abilities. Someone might worry, 'I can't see the images clearly enough,' or 'my visualization keeps fading.' But the effectiveness of the practice doesn't depend on creating perfect mental pictures. What matters is the intention and the emotional engagement with the healing qualities being visualized. Even a vague sense of healing light or a fleeting impression of a compassionate figure can have profound effects when practiced with sincerity." The benefits of regular visualization practice often extend beyond specific emotional healing to overall psychological integration. Many practitioners report greater access to inner resources, increased emotional resilience, and a more coherent sense of self. The practice seems to help bridge conscious and unconscious aspects of the psyche, creating greater internal harmony and reducing the energy wasted in inner conflict. a hospice chaplain who used visualization practices both personally and in her work with dying patients, shared. What I've found most valuable is how these practices help integrate disparate parts of ourselves. Many of us have aspects of our experience that feel fragmented or compartmentalized, perhaps a wounded inner child that feels separate from our adult self, or a spiritual aspect that seems disconnected from our everyday identity. Visualization creates bridges between these parts, allowing healing energy to flow where it was previously blocked. I've seen this work bring profound peace to people even in their final days of life. While visualization offers powerful tools for inner transformation, some people find it challenging to access healing through purely mental imagery. For these individuals, and indeed for anyone seeking to deepen their emotional release work, sound meditation with Tibetan singing bowls provides a complementary approach that works directly with the vibrational qualities of sound to facilitate emotional healing. Sound meditation with Tibetan singing bowls represents one of Buddhism's most direct approaches to emotional release, utilizing the tangible, physical properties of sound waves to affect our bodies and energy systems. Unlike practices that work primarily through mental focus or visualization, singing bowl meditation bypasses the thinking mind altogether, allowing sound vibrations to work directly on areas where emotional tension is stored. Tibetan singing bowls are metal bowls that produce rich, complex tones when struck with a mallet or when the mallet is rubbed around the bowl's rim. Traditionally made from an alloy of 7 metals corresponding to celestial bodies: gold, silver, copper, tin, lead, iron, and mercury. Silver, mercury, copper, iron, tin, and lead. Each bowl creates a unique harmonic resonance. Modern bowls may be made from different metal combinations but are designed to produce similar acoustic effects. A massage therapist who incorporated singing bowl meditation into her personal practice and client work explained, "What makes singing bowls so effective for emotional release is that sound vibrations can reach places in our bodies and energy fields that are inaccessible through other means." I've had clients who maintained rigid physical and emotional armor for years despite various therapeutic approaches, but when exposed to the penetrating vibrations of singing bowls, something would finally begin to soften and release. The bowls seem to bypass our mental defenses and speak directly to the cellular level where emotional memory is stored. The basic practice involves either listening to someone else playing the bowls or learning to play them yourself. You typically sit or lie comfortably in a quiet space where the sound can be fully experienced. As the bowls are played, you simply bring awareness to the sound vibrations and notice how they affect your body, emotions, and energy. Rather than analyzing the experience intellectually, you allow the sound to do its work, observing whatever sensations, emotions, or memories might arise as the vibrations move through your system. Many practitioners report that different bowls seem to resonate with specific areas of the body or particular emotional states. A low-pitched bowl might create vibrations felt deeply in the lower body, perhaps releasing fear or survival-related emotions stored in the root chakra area. A higher-pitched bowl might resonate with the heart or throat, facilitating release of grief or unexpressed emotions. Skilled practitioners can select and combine bowls to work with specific emotional patterns or blocked energy centers. A psychologist who uses singing bowl meditation in trauma recovery groups described, "For many trauma survivors, talking about their experiences can be re-traumatizing, and even body-based approaches can feel threatening if they've experienced bodily violation. Sound offers a gentler entry point. The vibrations of the bowls create a palpable but non-invasive way to begin sensing and releasing stored trauma. I've witnessed remarkable cathartic releases during these sessions, tears flowing, spontaneous emotional discharge, and afterward, a profound sense of peace that many clients describe as unlike anything they've experienced through other methods." What distinguishes Tibetan singing bowl meditation from casual sound relaxation is its integration with mindfulness and intention. Rather than simply bathing in pleasant sounds, practitioners maintain a quality of present awareness, noticing the effects of different tones and rhythms on their internal state. This mindful attention amplifies the healing potential of the sound vibrations, allowing them to work more effectively on areas of emotional blockage. The physiological effects of singing bowl meditation help explain its effectiveness for emotional release. Research has documented how the sound vibrations affect brainwave patterns, often inducing theta and delta states associated with deep relaxation and emotional processing. Studies have also shown changes in heart rate variability and immune markers, suggesting effects on the autonomic nervous system that support stress reduction and emotional regulation. For those interested in exploring this practice, various approaches are available. Many healing centers and meditation groups offer singing bowl sound baths where participants simply receive the sounds created by an experienced practitioner. These group sessions can be an excellent introduction to the practice and often create powerful collective field effects. For home practice, even a single quality singing bowl can provide significant benefits, though collections of bowls offering different tones allow for more comprehensive work with various emotional and energetic patterns. A corporate executive who discovered singing bowl meditation during a particularly stressful career transition shared, "I was skeptical at first. It seemed too simple to just lie there and listen to bowls being played. But from my very first session, I experienced emotional releases that years of therapy hadn't facilitated. During one session, as a particular bowl was being played near my chest, I suddenly began crying as grief I'd suppressed for years over my father's death finally surfaced. It wasn't just emotional. I could literally feel the vibrations breaking up tension I'd been carrying in my body. After that release, I experienced a lightness and clarity that transformed how I approached my work and relationships." While some approaches to emotional healing require extensive training or verbal processing skills, singing bowl meditation offers a remarkably accessible entry point. The practice doesn't depend on verbal articulation of emotional issues, special mental abilities, or even a specific cultural or religious framework. The direct experience of sound vibrations works across cultural and psychological barriers, making it especially valuable for those who find other approaches to emotional healing challenging or inaccessible. A meditation teacher who leads regular singing bowl sessions observed, "What I find most beautiful about this practice is how democratic it is. I've had participants ranging from analytical scientists to artists, from elderly individuals to young children, from various cultural and religious backgrounds, and virtually everyone experiences something meaningful. The sounds speak a universal language that transcends our differences and connects us with something fundamental about being human. The bowls remind us that at a basic level, we are all vibrational beings capable of resonating with healing frequencies." While the vibrational qualities of singing bowls work directly with our physical and energetic bodies, many practitioners find they still struggle with specific emotional imbalances that seem to follow recognizable patterns. This is where 5 Elements meditation, a practice developed within Tibetan Buddhist traditions, offers a comprehensive framework for understanding and balancing emotional states. By working with the 5 elements of earth, water, fire, air, and space, this meditation provides a systematic approach to emotional harmony that complements the more direct vibrational work of sound practices. 5 Elements. Meditation is based on the understanding that our emotional landscape reflects the same elemental forces that constitute the natural world. Each element corresponds to specific emotional qualities in both their balanced and imbalanced expressions. Earth relates to stability, groundedness, and security when balanced, but can manifest as stubbornness or heaviness when imbalanced. Water connects to fluidity, adaptability, and emotional depth in its healthy form, but might appear as emotional overwhelm or lack of boundaries when out of balance. Fire represents clarity, transformation, and healthy passion when balanced, but can become destructive anger or burnout when excessive. Air correlates with movement, communication, and intellectual clarity when in harmony. but might manifest as anxiety or scattered thinking when imbalanced. Space provides context and perspective for all other elements, representing openness and possibility when balanced, but potentially appearing as disconnection or emptiness when out of harmony. A clinical psychologist who incorporated 5 elements meditation into her practice explained, "What makes this approach so valuable is that it offers a map for understanding emotional patterns that might otherwise seem random or overwhelming. When a client comes in feeling stuck in their life, I might recognize an earth element imbalance and suggest specific practices to introduce more movement and fluidity. Someone else might be scattered and anxious, an air imbalance, and benefit from grounding practices that emphasize the earth element. The framework helps both identify the nature of emotional imbalances and point toward their remedies. The practice typically begins with a period of centered awareness, perhaps through breath meditation or body scanning to establish presence. Then the practitioner systematically works with each element, either focusing on all 5 in sequence or emphasizing particular elements that need attention. For each element, the practice involves 3 phases: recognizing the element's qualities both in the external world and within one's own being, noticing any imbalances in how that element manifests in one's emotional life, and visualizing or embodying the balanced expression of that element. For example, when working with the earth element, you might begin by visualizing actual earth, perhaps rich soil or solid rock, and feeling its qualities of stability, nourishment, and groundedness. Then you might check in with how these qualities manifest in your own life. Do you feel adequately grounded and stable, or do you feel unmoored and insecure? Alternatively, are you perhaps too rigid or resistant to change? After recognizing the current state of this element in your emotional life, you would then visualize and feel the balanced expression of earth energy flowing through your being, perhaps experiencing it as a warm, golden energy moving through your lower body and creating a sense of stable presence. A yoga instructor who used 5 elements meditation to work through a period of burnout shared, "I had been pushing myself relentlessly in my teaching and personal practice, ignoring signals from my body and emotions that I needed rest. Through the elements practice, I recognized this as a fire imbalance, too much heat and transformative energy without enough of the nourishing and receptive qualities of earth and water. By systematically working with visualizations that cooled the excess fire and strengthened earth and water elements in my system, I found my way back to a sustainable balance. The framework gave me both understanding and practical tools for addressing the specific nature of my imbalance." What makes 5 elements meditation particularly effective for emotional healing is that it works simultaneously with physical sensations, energy patterns, mental understanding, and emotional experience. Rather than treating these as separate domains, the practice recognizes their interconnection, addressing imbalances at multiple levels simultaneously. This integrated approach often creates more comprehensive and lasting shifts than practices that work with just one dimension of experience. For those new to the practice, beginning with a single element that seems most relevant to current emotional challenges can be an accessible entry point. Someone struggling with lethargy or depression might focus particularly on the fire element to cultivate more energy and clarity. A person dealing with anger issues might work especially with water to introduce more fluidity and cooling quality to their emotional landscape. As familiarity with the practice grows, more comprehensive sessions addressing all 5 elements in sequence can help maintain overall emotional balance. A business consultant who taught elements meditation to corporate clients described, "In high-pressure work environments, I often see predictable elemental imbalances, too much fire, driving ambition, and air, constant mental activity, with insufficient earth stability and water emotional fluidity. Teaching executives to recognize these patterns and implement brief daily practices to rebalance the elements has proven remarkably effective for preventing burnout and improving both well-being and performance. The framework is accessible enough that even skeptical, Analytically minded professionals can engage with it meaningfully. The practice can be adapted to various contexts and personal preferences. Some practitioners work with the elements through visualization, perhaps imagining each element as a colored light or substance moving through their body. Others connect with the elements more kinesthetically, feeling the qualities of each element as specific sensations, the solidity of earth as weight in the lower body, the flow of water as fluid movement in the abdomen, the warmth of fire in the solar plexus, the movement of air in the chest, and the openness of space in the head and beyond the body. Still others might use physical objects representing each element: a stone for earth, a bowl of water, a candle flame, a feather, and an empty bowl as focal points for their meditation. Regular practice gradually develops a more nuanced awareness of how these elemental energies operate in daily life, enabling practitioners to recognize imbalances early and take corrective action before they manifest as more serious emotional difficulties. Many report an increased sense of agency in their emotional lives rather than feeling at the mercy of seemingly random emotional states. They develop the capacity to work skillfully with the underlying energetic patterns that give rise to those states. While Five Elements meditation offers a framework for understanding and balancing the underlying energies of our emotional landscape, many practitioners find they still struggle to clearly identify and track specific emotional patterns as they unfold in daily life. This is where mindful emotional awareness practice provides crucial skills for recognizing, naming, and working skillfully with emotions as they arise moment by moment. This practice develops our capacity to catch emotions early in their formation, before they escalate into overwhelming states or trigger habitual reactive patterns. Mindful emotional awareness begins with the recognition that most of us have significant blind spots in our emotional lives. We might be aware of major emotional events, but miss the subtle feelings that precede them. We might recognize certain emotions readily, perhaps anger or joy, while remaining oblivious to others like envy or shame. We might notice emotions only once they've become intense enough to override our awareness, missing the early signals that could allow more skillful responses. This practice systematically addresses these limitations, developing a more comprehensive and nuanced emotional awareness. A corporate manager who incorporated the practice into his daily routine shared, "I always considered myself emotionally intelligent because I could handle difficult conversations without losing my temper. But through mindful emotional awareness practice, I discovered I was missing huge swaths of my emotional experience. I'd bypass subtle feelings of disappointment or hurt and jump straight to problem-solving mode. Learning to pause and actually identify what I was feeling moment by moment completely transformed my relationships, both at work and at home. I now catch the small emotional signals before they become problems requiring management." The practice typically begins with setting aside specific times, perhaps 5 to 10 minutes several times daily, to check in with your emotional landscape. During these periods, you pause whatever you're doing and ask 3 simple questions. What am I feeling right now? Where do I feel it in my body? What thoughts or stories accompany this feeling? You approach these questions with curious, non-judgmental awareness, simply noticing what's present without trying to change your emotional state. As the practice develops, you begin extending this awareness into daily activities, perhaps setting reminders to check in with your emotions during routine transitions like moving between work tasks, entering a new environment, or before and after interactions with others. These brief check-ins, sometimes taking just 30 seconds, gradually build the habit of emotional awareness, making it increasingly automatic to notice feelings as they arise rather than only after they've escalated. A therapist who teaches this practice to clients explained, "What makes mindful emotional awareness so powerful is that it creates a crucial gap between stimulus and response. Most emotional reactivity occurs because we don't recognize what we're feeling until we're already caught in a habitual reaction pattern. By developing the ability to identify emotions in their early stages, We create space to make conscious choices about how to respond. This doesn't mean suppressing emotions, but rather relating to them with greater wisdom and skill. The practice emphasizes learning to distinguish between primary emotions, our immediate, authentic emotional responses to situations, and secondary emotions that arise in reaction to the primary ones. For example, someone might feel hurt, primary emotion, when a friend cancels plans, but quickly move into anger, secondary emotion, because anger feels more empowering than hurt. By recognizing this pattern, practitioners can acknowledge the underlying vulnerable emotion rather than getting caught in reactive secondary states that often create additional problems. A teacher who used the practice to address classroom management challenges described, "Before learning mindful emotional awareness, I would often find myself snapping at students when they were disruptive, then feeling guilty about my reaction. Through regular emotional check-ins, I discovered that before the anger arose, I was actually experiencing fear of losing control of the classroom, fear of being judged as incompetent. When I learned to catch and acknowledge that fear early, I could respond to classroom challenges from a place of centered authority rather than reactive anger. This not only improved my teaching, but also modeled emotional intelligence for my students." What distinguishes this practice from generic mindfulness is its specific focus on emotional recognition and the development of an increasingly nuanced emotional vocabulary. Many practitioners are surprised to discover how limited their emotional language has been, perhaps using generic terms like good, bad, stressed, or fine, rather than more precise descriptors that capture the specific quality of their experience. The practice involves gradually expanding this vocabulary, learning to distinguish between similar emotions like disappointment and sadness, or irritation and anger. This expanded emotional vocabulary isn't merely an intellectual exercise, but creates more neural pathways for emotional processing. Research in affective neuroscience suggests that naming emotions with precision actually helps regulate them more effectively, a phenomenon sometimes called "name it to tame it." By developing more granular emotional awareness, practitioners often find that overwhelming emotional states naturally become more manageable simply through being precisely recognized. A meditation instructor who teaches mindful emotional awareness to beginners noted, "Many people come to meditation hoping to get rid of difficult emotions, but that approach actually creates more problems. This practice offers an alternative, learning to be with emotions skillfully by first recognizing them clearly." Students are often amazed to discover how much of their suffering comes not from the emotions themselves, but from their confusion about what they're feeling and their attempts to avoid certain feelings. Simply developing the capacity to accurately identify, "I'm feeling disappointed right now," or "this is anxiety arising," creates a very different relationship with emotional experience. The practice also helps identify recurring emotional patterns and triggers. Through regular check-ins, practitioners begin recognizing how certain situations, interactions, or even thoughts reliably evoke particular emotional responses. This pattern recognition is invaluable for breaking free from automatic emotional reactions that may have been operating unnoticed for decades. Rather than being blindsided by seemingly random emotional upheavals, practitioners develop a map of their emotional terrain that allows more skillful navigation. For those interested in developing this practice, consistency matters more than duration. Brief, frequent check-ins throughout the day typically prove more effective than occasional longer sessions. Many find it helpful to use specific triggers for these check-ins, perhaps the ping of an hourly reminder, transitions between activities, or physical cues like walking through doorways or stopping at red lights. The key is establishing emotional awareness as a habitual part of daily life, rather than a separate practice reserved for special times. While mindful emotional awareness helps us recognize and name our emotional patterns as they arise, many practitioners discover that certain emotions, particularly anger, resentment, and grudges, seem especially resistant to this awareness-based approach alone. These emotions often have deep roots in past hurts that remain unresolved, creating ongoing suffering that can persist for years or even decades after the original events. This is where forgiveness meditation offers a systematic Buddhist approach to releasing the burden of resentment and freeing ourselves from the prison of unresolved anger. Forgiveness meditation addresses a universal human challenge: how to deal with the inevitable hurts and betrayals that occur in a lifetime without carrying their emotional weight forever. The Buddhist approach to forgiveness differs significantly from some common cultural misconceptions about what forgiveness means. It isn't about condoning harmful actions, pretending the hurt didn't happen, reconciling with those who caused harm, or bypassing genuine emotions. Instead, it focuses on releasing the internal suffering caused by holding on to resentment, recognizing that forgiveness ultimately benefits the forgiver more than the forgiven. A high school counselor who incorporated forgiveness meditation into her own life and her work with teenagers explained, "Before learning this practice, I misunderstood forgiveness as something you do for the other person, which made me resistant when the hurt felt unjust or never acknowledged." The Buddhist approach completely reframed forgiveness as an act of self-liberation. I realized I could release resentment towards someone who hurt me without ever speaking to them again, if that's what safety required. This understanding made forgiveness accessible in situations where I'd previously thought it impossible. The practice typically begins by establishing a foundation of self-compassion and stability. Attempting to forgive others before acknowledging our own pain often leads to premature or superficial forgiveness that doesn't truly resolve the underlying hurt. Practitioners often start with mindfulness of their current emotional state, perhaps using breath awareness or body scanning to ground themselves in present experience. From this stable foundation, they begin a step-by-step process of forgiveness work. A common structure involves 4 stages, though the practice can be adapted to individual needs. First, recognizing the pain and acknowledging its impact, bringing mindful awareness to how carrying this resentment has affected you and continues to affect your life. Second, developing the genuine intention to release this burden for your own well-being, recognizing that forgiveness doesn't mean you approve of what happened. Third, actively offering forgiveness through specific phrases or visualization practices. And fourth, acknowledging that forgiveness is often a process rather than a one-time event, bringing patience and self-compassion to this unfolding journey. A business executive who used forgiveness meditation to work through a difficult professional betrayal shared, "I was stabbed in the back by a colleague I trusted, which cost me a major promotion. For 2 years, I carried intense resentment that was affecting my health and current work relationships. During a retreat where I learned forgiveness meditation, I realized how much energy I was wasting on this grudge. The practice helped me see that while I couldn't change what happened, I could choose to stop the continued suffering I was creating by holding on to the anger. Over several months of regular practice, I gradually felt the heaviness lifting. I still think what the person did was wrong, but the emotional charge has dissipated. I no longer feel that knot in my stomach when their name comes up." The meditation often incorporates specific phrases that are repeated with sincere intention, such as, "I forgive you for causing me harm, knowingly or unknowingly," or "I release myself from the suffering of holding on to this resentment." These phrases aren't magical formulas, but tools to reorient the mind toward release and healing. Many practitioners find visualization helpful as well, perhaps imagining the burden of resentment as a heavy object they're finally setting down, or picturing the person who caused harm as another suffering human being doing their best with limited awareness and capacities. For particularly deep wounds, forgiveness work usually unfolds in layers. The first attempts might bring up stronger anger rather than immediate release, as buried emotions surface into awareness. This intensification is actually a sign of progress. Emotions that have been suppressed are finally being acknowledged. With continued practice, many report a gradual softening, first perhaps reaching a neutral state regarding the hurt, and eventually sometimes even finding compassion for the person who caused harm, recognizing the suffering or ignorance that likely drove their actions. A therapist specializing in trauma recovery noted, "Forgiveness meditation can be tremendously healing, but timing matters greatly. Prematurely pushing forgiveness before adequate safety has been established, or before the full impact of the harm has been acknowledged, can create additional harm." I find this practice works best as part of a comprehensive approach that includes establishing physical and emotional safety, processing traumatic memories with appropriate support, and rebuilding a sense of empowerment and choice. Within that broader context, forgiveness meditation often becomes a powerful, culminating practice that helps prevent past wounds from limiting future possibilities. What makes Buddhist forgiveness practice particularly nuanced is its recognition that forgiveness isn't an all-or-nothing state, but a continual process of releasing and healing. The practice acknowledges that we might need to forgive the same hurt multiple times as new layers of its impact become apparent. This realistic approach prevents the discouragement that can arise when emotional residue resurfaces after what seemed like completed forgiveness work. Research increasingly supports the benefits of forgiveness for psychological and physical health. Studies show that forgiveness practices are associated with reduced depression and anxiety, improved cardiovascular health, better immune function, and stronger relationships. These findings confirm what Buddhist practitioners have long observed, that resentment creates ongoing stress and tension in the mind-body system, while forgiveness creates conditions for natural healing and well-being to emerge. For those interested in exploring forgiveness meditation, various resources are available, from traditional Buddhist teachings to contemporary adaptations in therapeutic contexts. Many find it helpful to begin with smaller hurts before attempting to forgive major betrayals or traumas. The practice can also be directed toward oneself. Many people carry resentment toward themselves for past actions or perceived failures, and self-forgiveness becomes an equally important dimension of emotional healing. As practitioners develop skill in releasing resentment through forgiveness practices, many naturally begin questioning the broader patterns of how we relate to all types of change and loss in our lives. This inquiry leads to another cornerstone of Buddhist emotional healing: contemplation on impermanence. This profound practice helps us develop acceptance of life's inevitable changes and transitions, reducing the suffering that comes from resistance to what cannot be altered. Contemplation on impermanence addresses one of the most fundamental sources of human suffering: our tendency to cling to things, people, situations, and even identities that are inherently transient. While most of us intellectually understand that everything changes, we often live as though what we currently have will last forever, creating shock and extreme suffering when the inevitable transitions occur. Buddhist impermanence practice bridges this gap between intellectual understanding and embodied wisdom, helping us align our expectations and attitudes with the reality of constant change. A hospice nurse who regularly practiced impermanence contemplation shared, "Working with dying patients, I witness the suffering that comes from being unprepared for change on a daily basis. Families who resist accepting their loved one's condition often experience the most traumatic grief, while those who can acknowledge what's happening, while still painful, tend to find meaningful closure. My own impermanence practice doesn't make me cold or detached, quite the opposite. It helps me truly appreciate each moment with patients and loved ones, knowing these moments won't last forever. There's a bittersweetness to this awareness that actually enhances my capacity for joy and connection." The practice typically involves setting aside regular time to reflect on the changing nature of everything we experience. This might begin with observing obvious examples of impermanence, perhaps watching how weather patterns shift throughout a day, noticing seasonal changes in nature, or reflecting on how our physical body has changed throughout our lifetime. From these concrete examples, The contemplation gradually extends to more subtle and personally meaningful dimensions of change. A structured approach might involve systematically reflecting on the impermanent nature of external conditions, possessions, living situations, jobs, relationships, how connections with others naturally evolve and change, physical health, the body's constant process of renewal and aging, and even mental states, how emotions and thoughts arise and pass, never remaining static. The practitioner brings gentle, curious awareness to these reflections, noticing resistance when it arises and gradually developing a more accepting relationship with change itself. A psychologist who incorporated impermanence contemplation into her therapeutic approach explained, "Much of what brings people to therapy is actually struggling with some form of change or loss, whether it's a relationship ending, aging parents, health challenges, or career transitions. While we need to fully acknowledge the genuine grief that accompanies loss, I've found that regular contemplation of impermanence helps develop a kind of emotional resilience that makes all types of change more navigable. It's not about bypassing feelings, but about developing a larger perspective that can hold difficult emotions without being completely overwhelmed by them." What makes this contemplation particularly powerful is that it's not merely an intellectual exercise, but an invitation to directly experience the changing nature of reality in each moment. Practitioners often report a shift from abstract understanding of impermanence to a visceral recognition that changes how they relate to their lives. This shift doesn't create detachment or indifference, but rather a more appreciative engagement with what's present, knowing it won't remain exactly as it is. A professor who used impermanence contemplation to navigate a difficult career transition described, "When I lost the academic position I'd worked toward for 15 years, I was devastated. Everything I'd identified with was suddenly gone. During this period, I began a daily practice of contemplating impermanence, not to minimize my loss, but to help me contextualize it within the broader reality of change that affects everyone. Gradually, this practice helped me loosen my grip on my former identity and become more open to new possibilities. I realized that holding tightly to what was gone was creating suffering beyond the actual loss itself. This didn't happen overnight, but consistent practice gradually transformed my relationship with this major life change." The practice cultivates a quality that Buddhism calls equanimity, the capacity to maintain mental and emotional balance amid life's inevitable ups and downs. This doesn't mean becoming passive or resigned, but rather developing the wisdom to discern what can be changed through our efforts and what must simply be acknowledged and accepted. This discernment prevents wasting energy fighting against realities that cannot be altered, redirecting that energy toward constructive responses to changing circumstances. For those facing specific major transitions, perhaps a health diagnosis, relationship ending, or career change, impermanence contemplation can be focused particularly on that situation. The practice might involve acknowledging the full impact of the change, recognizing common human patterns of resistance, and gradually opening to new possibilities that may emerge from this transition. Many find it helpful to reflect on previous major changes they've navigated, recognizing their own capacity for adaptation that may not be apparent in the midst of current challenges. Research on the psychological impact of impermanence contemplation shows interesting results. Studies suggest that regular reflection on life's transient nature can increase appreciation for everyday experiences, reduce attachment to material possessions, enhance relationship satisfaction through greater presence, and even reduce fear of death. These findings align with Buddhist understanding that accepting impermanence doesn't diminish life's meaning, but actually enhances our capacity to fully engage with and appreciate each moment. A meditation teacher who guides students through impermanence contemplation noted, "The most profound shift I observe in long-term practitioners is moving from seeing impermanence as a sad reality we must grudgingly accept to recognizing it as the very condition that makes life precious. When we truly understand that nothing lasts forever, not our problems, not our joys, not even our lives, we naturally become more present and appreciative. Paradoxically, acknowledging that everything changes helps us show up more fully for our lives exactly as they are right now. While contemplating impermanence helps us accept life's inevitable changes, many practitioners discover that this acceptance alone doesn't automatically cultivate the positive emotional qualities needed for a fulfilling life. This recognition leads naturally to meditation on the four immeasurables, a comprehensive Buddhist practice specifically designed to develop four essential positive emotional states: loving kindness, metta; compassion, karuna; appreciative joy, mudita; and equanimity, upekkha. Together, these four qualities create an emotional foundation that supports deep healing while counteracting specific negative emotions that perpetuate suffering. The four immeasurables practice addresses a crucial insight from Buddhist psychology that simply removing negative states isn't enough. We must actively cultivate positive qualities to fill the space. Each of the four immeasurable qualities serves as a specific antidote to common destructive emotions. Loving kindness counters anger and hatred. Compassion counters cruelty and indifference. Appreciative joy counters envy and resentment. And equanimity counters both grasping attachment and aversive rejection. By systematically developing these positive states, practitioners create new emotional habits that gradually replace long-standing negative patterns. A social worker who incorporated the four immeasurables into her daily practice shared, "After years of high-stress work with trauma survivors, I was experiencing compassion fatigue and burnout. My negative emotions, irritability, resentment, numbness, were affecting both my work and home life. The four immeasurables practice gave me a systematic way to replenish my emotional resources rather than just trying to manage the depletion. Starting with just 10 minutes each morning, I'd focus on cultivating each quality in turn. Within weeks, colleagues commented on the change in my presence with clients. I found myself genuinely reconnecting with the care and commitment that had drawn me to this work originally." The practice typically begins with establishing a calm, centered state through brief mindfulness of breathing or body awareness. Then the practitioner systematically cultivates each of the four qualities, often using specific phrases and visualization. For loving kindness, traditional phrases include, "May all beings be happy," "May all beings be safe," "May all beings be healthy," "May all beings live with ease." For compassion, "May all beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering." For appreciative joy, "May the happiness and good fortune of others continue and increase." For equanimity, "All beings are the owners of their karma. Their happiness depends on their actions, not my wishes for them." These phrases are typically directed first toward oneself, then toward a benefactor or beloved person, then toward a neutral person, then toward a difficult person, and finally toward all beings everywhere. This graduated approach helps develop each quality in an authentic way, starting where it flows most naturally and gradually extending to more challenging relationships and situations. A high school teacher described how the four immeasurables transformed his classroom dynamics. Teaching teenagers can be emotionally draining, especially with students who act out or seem disengaged. I started practicing appreciative joy meditation specifically because I realized I was feeling resentful towards students who succeeded easily while failing to recognize the small victories of those who struggled. By intentionally cultivating joy in others' successes, both the obvious achievements and the less visible ones, I found myself becoming a more effective and energized teacher. Instead of seeing certain students as problems, I began noticing and celebrating their strengths, however small. This shift in my perception actually changed how they behaved in class. What distinguishes the four immeasurables from generic positive thinking is their comprehensive nature and systematic development. rather than trying to simply replace negative thoughts with positive ones. The practice gradually transforms our fundamental emotional tendencies through consistent training. Neuroscience research supports this approach, showing that regular meditation on these qualities actually changes brain structures associated with emotional processing and empathy. Studies demonstrate increased activation in brain regions associated with positive emotions and decreased activity in areas linked to negative reactivity among long-term practitioners. For those new to the practice, starting with whichever quality feels most accessible can build confidence and momentum. Someone experiencing intense anger might begin with loving kindness as a direct antidote. Someone feeling emotionally numb might focus on compassion to reconnect with their capacity for care. The key is consistency. Even 5 to 10 minutes daily of focused cultivation can gradually reshape emotional patterns that have been established over decades. A business executive who integrated the 4 immeasurables into his leadership approach shared, "I was known as a brilliant but feared leader, someone who got results but left emotional casualties along the way. After a health scare forced me to re-evaluate my life, I began exploring Buddhist practices and discovered the 4 immeasurables. The equanimity practice particularly transformed my leadership style. I learned to care deeply about outcomes while releasing the rigid attachment to how exactly they should unfold. This allowed me to trust my team more, delegate effectively, and maintain perspective during crises. My team's performance actually improved as fear-based motivation was replaced with genuine collaborative engagement." Many practitioners find it helpful to focus on a single quality for an extended period, perhaps working with loving kindness daily for a month before moving to compassion. This immersive approach allows for deeper integration of each quality. Others prefer to work with all 4 in each session, perhaps dedicating 5 minutes to each quality. The practice can be adapted to individual needs and circumstances while maintaining the essential structure of systematically cultivating these positive emotional states. A meditation teacher with 20 years of experience guiding students in the 4 immeasurables observed, "The most common obstacle I see is practitioners trying to force these feelings or turning the practice into a mechanical repetition of phrases without genuine emotional engagement. The development needs to be gradual and authentic. We're not trying to manufacture fake positive states, but to nurture genuine qualities that are already present in seed form. Sometimes this means working at the edge of our current capacity, gently expanding our emotional range without demanding instant transformation." As the practice deepens, many report that these 4 qualities begin to infuse daily life beyond formal meditation sessions, challenging situations that previously triggered automatic negative reactions, like traffic jams sparking anger or others' success triggering envy, gradually begin to elicit more balanced and positive responses. This shift represents a fundamental rewiring of emotional tendencies rather than effortful emotional management, creating more spontaneous positive engagement with life's varied circumstances. While the 4 immeasurables help cultivate positive emotional states, many practitioners find they still encounter persistent patterns of suffering whose origins remain mysterious. Despite their best efforts with various meditation techniques, certain emotional struggles continue to resurface, suggesting deeper roots that haven't yet been addressed. This is where mindful self-inquiry offers a profound Buddhist approach for discovering and transforming the underlying causes of emotional suffering rather than merely managing its symptoms. Mindful self-inquiry combines the clarity of mindful awareness with targeted questioning to illuminate the often unconscious beliefs, identifications, and patterns that perpetuate our suffering. Unlike analytical or intellectual approaches that engage primarily with concepts, this practice brings gentle yet precise awareness to the lived experience of emotional patterns as they manifest in the body, energy, emotions, and thoughts. Through this multi-layered exploration, practitioners often uncover insights that conceptual understanding alone cannot reach. A university professor who used mindful self-inquiry to work with chronic anxiety described her experience. I'd been practicing basic mindfulness for years and had a solid intellectual understanding of Buddhist principles, but certain anxiety patterns persisted despite my practice. When I learned mindful self-inquiry, something shifted. Rather than just observing my anxiety, I began asking deeper questions while maintaining mindful awareness. What is this anxiety protecting me from? What belief is underneath this feeling? What happens in my body just before the anxiety arises? Staying present with these questions without rushing to answers, I discovered a core belief formed in childhood that my worth depended entirely on achievement. This insight didn't magically eliminate the anxiety, but it revealed its source in a way that allowed real transformation to begin. The practice typically starts with centering through mindfulness meditation, establishing a clear, present awareness that will serve as the foundation for inquiry. From this centered state, the practitioner brings attention to a specific emotional pattern they wish to explore, perhaps recurring anger, persistent shame, relationship anxiety, or any suffering that seems to follow a recognizable pattern, rather than getting caught in the content or story of the emotion. They maintain awareness of how this pattern manifests right now in their direct experience. With this present moment awareness established, the inquiry begins. Questions are posed not for intellectual analysis, but as pointers that direct awareness toward areas that might reveal deeper insights. Common questions include: what is the bodily felt sense of this emotion? Where exactly do I feel it? What happens just before this emotion arises? What belief or assumption is present with this feeling? What am I identifying with when this pattern occurs? What is this emotion trying to protect or preserve? The questions aren't answered conceptually, but explored experientially, with patient attention to whatever arises in response. A psychotherapist who integrated mindful self-inquiry into her clinical work explained, "What makes this approach particularly effective is that it bypasses our habitual mental explanations about why we feel the way we do. Most of us have stories about our emotional patterns that we've repeated for years. But these explanations often keep us stuck rather than leading to genuine insight. By directing awareness to the actual lived experience of an emotional pattern, especially how it manifests in the body and energy, mindful self-inquiry often reveals dimensions of our suffering that our conceptual mind has never recognized." What distinguishes Buddhist self-inquiry from some psychological approaches is its recognition that suffering stems not just from past conditioning or trauma, but from current patterns of identification and clinging. The practice investigates not only why do I feel this way, but more fundamentally, who is this I that seems to be suffering? This exploration often reveals how we create and maintain a sense of separate self through habitual patterns of thinking, feeling, and perceiving, patterns that can be recognized and gradually released. A meditation teacher with extensive experience guiding self-inquiry described, "The most profound insights often come when practitioners recognize how they've been unconsciously constructing their sense of identity around certain emotions or stories. Someone might discover they've been maintaining a self-image as the responsible one that drives their anxiety, or a story about being unlovable that shapes their relationship patterns. Seeing these constructions clearly doesn't necessarily dismantle them immediately, but it creates crucial space between oneself and these patterns, making them less compulsive and all-consuming." For those interested in exploring mindful self-inquiry, certain conditions support effective practice. First, establishing a foundation of basic mindfulness skill helps maintain clear awareness during inquiry rather than getting lost in thought. Second, cultivating self-compassion creates the emotional safety needed to face potentially challenging insights. Third, working with a qualified teacher or therapist familiar with the practice can provide guidance when difficult material arises or when one gets stuck in habitual thought patterns. A corporate consultant who used mindful self-inquiry to address workplace stress shared, "My initial attempts at self-inquiry kept leading me back to the same intellectual explanations about being overworked. But when I really stayed with the bodily experience of stress during a guided inquiry session, I discovered something surprising. Underneath the stress was fear. And beneath the fear was a deep belief that I was somehow fraudulent and would eventually be exposed. This imposter syndrome was driving me to overwork as proof of my legitimacy. That insight changed everything about how I approached my work and self-care. I never would have discovered it through my usual analytical thinking." Many practitioners find it helpful to focus initial inquiry sessions on patterns that are uncomfortable but not overwhelming. Starting with mild to moderate emotional challenges builds skill and confidence before addressing more difficult issues. Recording insights that arise during practice, perhaps in a dedicated journal, helps track patterns and integrate understandings that might otherwise be forgotten or minimized between sessions. The benefits of regular mindful self-inquiry extend beyond specific emotional healing to a more fundamental shift in how we relate to all experience. Many practitioners report developing greater curiosity toward difficult emotions rather than automatic avoidance or identification. This curious, open stance itself transforms the emotional landscape, creating space for new responses even to long-standing triggers. The practice also cultivates a kind of emotional courage, the willingness to turn toward challenging feelings with presence and interest rather than defaulting to habitual coping mechanisms. A hospice worker who practiced regular self-inquiry described its unexpected benefits. "Working with death daily brings up existential questions and emotions that can be overwhelming. Mindful self-inquiry helped me recognize that beneath my professional calm was unprocessed grief and fear about my own mortality. But the practice offered something beyond just this insight. It developed my capacity to stay present with absolutely anything that arises in my experience. This presence doesn't make difficult emotions disappear, but it completely transforms my relationship with them. Instead of being caught in reactivity or shut down, I can meet even the most challenging situations and feelings with a kind of spacious awareness that includes but isn't limited by them."